Randy, that's Dan Devone. Evan Giddings, he'll be back next week on Warriors This Week. He's recovering from a bit of a cold. Hopefully he's doing well. You'll probably hear him back here on 95.7 The Game on Monday. But as a result, I'm in alongside Dan Devone here on this Saturday. Dan, good morning. It's great to be with you. How you doing?
I'm doing really well. Looking forward to today. You got the pregame show?
I do.
Yeah, this is going to be fun.
5:30 in Philly, so 4:30 Warriors Live starts.
Any thoughts on the 76ers? Well,
Embiid now out for the year officially.
Yeah. You know what? We talked about this yesterday. I don't know if you guys picked this up and went with it, but Embiid, in terms of his future going forward and that knee, there's talk about literally, I read this, removing a bone from his hip and replacing it to his knee. So, I mean, you're talking about a guy that, I mean, if there was a sham bomb over the offseason or during the late summer that says Joel Embiid has, retired from the sport, I would not be shocked.
So let's say he was available for incredibly cheap. You're not touching him with the 10-foot pole?
No.
Yeah.
I just don't get those knees are shot.
It doesn't seem like it.
Yeah.
It's Warriors This Week here on 95.7 The Game. We're with you until noon. 888-957-9570. Dan Devone, Mark Randy with you. We'll take your calls, your texts. We'll keep an eye on our YouTube chat as well, youtube.com/957 The Game. Things are all good in Warrior land right now, Dan. They won in Orlando a couple of nights ago. We know what Steph did, 56 points, 12 threes. They're 7-1 with Jimmy Butler. Things are also kind of going their way in the Western Conference right now. We were keeping an eye on the games from yesterday, the important ones for the Warriors. First of all, the Timberwolves lost to the Jazz. The Jazz picked up their 15th win of the year. Of note, the Timberwolves without Ant Edwards because he picked up whatever number technical it is, 16 technicals, which triggers an automatic suspension for a game. So he did not play. The Jazz win that game. As a result, the Warriors are now a full game ahead of the T-Wolves. Elsewhere, the Battle of L.A., the Lakers, led by Luka and LeBron, they beat the Clippers. So the Clippers lose, and now the Warriors and Clippers have identical 32-27 records. So the Warriors are tied with the Clippers for the 6th. The Clippers, though, have the tiebreaker, so they're still technically ahead of the Warriors. And then one other, Dan, to keep an eye on, I get maybe two others. The Pelicans lost to the Suns, so the Suns win, but they're so far out of it, I don't think the Warriors really care about them. The other one is that the Grizzlies lost to the Knicks. The Grizzlies have kind of distanced themselves above the Warriors, but if one of those teams, like 3 through 5, fall and have a rough close to the season, Dan, and the Warriors play well, they might be able to jump both the Clippers and somebody else. So keep an eye on the Grizzlies, keep an eye on the Rockets, keep an eye on the Lakers as the season goes along. But it's one thing, Dan, for the Warriors to be 7-1 in their last 8, and it's another for almost everything going their way elsewhere in the Western Conference.
Yeah, and it doesn't matter to me whether you get in as a 5 or even if you catch the Lakers at 4, which is being pretty ambitious, just avoid the play-in. Especially for a team that's reliant on a bunch of players that are at 30, your best players are 35 and older, then I think it's really significant that you get that week off at the end of the season.
No doubt.
And then once you get into the postseason, Graham, we always have to remind ourselves, I don't think that load management and being an older basketball team is as much of a factor as it is during the regular season, simply because you have all that rest in between games.
No back-to-backs.
No back-to-backs.
You have 2 days between, you have a travel day and a day off.
And the playoffs last for nearly, 2 months. This thing doesn't end until June. So it's just crucial that you get to the play-in. Should you get the Rockets to catch the 5 seed? I mean, certainly that's gravy, but just be at number 6 and let everything else take care of what's going to happen. Because I think, if you get in as the 6th seed and you're playing, hopefully, the Grizzlies, if the season were to end today, that, to me, is a favorable matchup.
Yeah, I think you would want the Grizzlies. You'd want somehow the Rockets, although that seems unlikely. The Rockets are going to be up at the 3. The way you'd probably take on the Rockets is if you somehow climb to the 4 or the 5 and they were the other 4 or 5 spot. But then you might have a second-round matchup against OKC. The dream might be, you're right, be the 6. Memphis is the 3. You feel good about that, and then you also avoid the OKC half of the bracket.
Yeah, and I think that the Grizzlies right now, while they're big and they're strong, it's all about Ja. And for whatever reason, he's a little bit off these days, and I can't really explain it. He's healthy, but he's just not Ja.
Yeah.
And Ja Morant, they follow his lead. And when he has that energy and he's doing that end line to end line, those crazy getting to the rim and dunking on guys, they feed off of
360
that.
layups.
That's been absent for whatever reason over the last couple of months. And it's been somewhat of a head scratch, but they'll go as far as he takes them. And as of right now, he has not been very good. And as a result, Memphis, like everybody else, is sort of dropping to the Golden State Warriors.
They're 5-5 in their last 10, including that loss last night. Houston is also 5-5 in their last 10. The Clippers are 4-6 in their last 10. They've got some injury issues. They've got a lot of rough, tough games coming up as well. So I think, frankly, Dan, the Warriors should be the favorite for the 6 seed at this point. The 6, it's crazy how fast things have changed, because just as recently as like 2 weeks ago, all of us out here in the Bay talking about, well, 6 should be the goal, 6 should be the goal, 6 should be the goal. And honestly, it kind of felt like, wishful thinking a little bit. Like maybe just make sure you're in the top half of the
Well, you had to leapfrog like 4 teams at the time.
And now you blink, and they're tied for the 6 already. And you're thinking, well, the 6 is almost now kind of like the baseline. Anything less than the 6, and it feels like a major disappointment. It's crazy how fast things change.
Well, I talked about this yesterday. Just think about a month ago after that loss to Toronto, just how low things were. And the post-game comments by that of Steve Kerr, who abruptly got up and left the presser. And, of course, what it is that now infamously what Steph Curry had to say, and here we are, a team that has been rejuvenated, Steph dropping 56, and now at the 6 seed, although currently tied. So it's not a done deal. And it's going to be interesting to see how they play these teams that are in front of them now in the post-Jimmy era. So we know the Clippers sort of own them prior to this, but let's just see how these matchups that were favorable for the Clippers, favorable for some of these other teams now with Jimmy on board, how do the Warriors fare against those teams? The one thing I do want to mention when you talk about finals last night, the Pistons win streak came to an end. The Nuggets got them. So they were the hottest team in the NBA, winners of 8 in a row. Detroit, I looked this up. This time last year, guess what their record was?
Oh, so they're 33-27 right now. This time last year, they must have been like, so they've played 60 games exactly. They must have been like,
they weren't at 60, but they were at 58. Okay. They were 8 and 50.
I was going to say 12 and 48 or whatever. That's crazy.
8 single digits a year ago. So it just goes to show you for anybody, and the Warriors were sort of in this space that things can change relatively quick in the NBA.
I love the Pistons. They're fun. Cade Cunningham is special.
He's in the top 10 in scoring now.
Yeah, he's going to be all NBA selection this year. He's got to be. And they're starting to get talked about a little bit more, but as a team to keep an eye on the next couple of years in the Eastern Conference, I really like Detroit.
We talk about Amen Thompson. His brother in Detroit is balling out too. Yeah. Yes, absolutely.
They're both really, really good young players, and they're both Bay Area kids as well. I think this is really interesting for the Warriors, Dan, and you brought up how they play teams like the Clippers going forward. I think you could also throw the Lakers into that mix. They haven't played the Lakers with Jimmy Butler. They play them one more time in the regular season. There's a non-zero chance that there is a Warriors-Lakers postseason series coming up, and that would be interesting. But the Warriors' issue, Dan, this year hasn't necessarily been what it was last year. Last year was they, for the most part, beat who they were supposed to beat, but they just could not beat the good teams. They were terrible against the good teams. This year, they've actually had a pretty good record against some of the better teams in the league. They've beaten Boston. They've beaten Oklahoma City twice. They've beaten Memphis twice. They've beaten Houston 3 times. Now, they have struggled against the Lakers. They've only played Denver once, and they lost that game as well. Their issue hasn't been that they've fallen flat against the good teams. It's that they've lost like 7 games against bad teams that they shouldn't have lost. But ever since Jimmy Butler's been here, they dominate Charlotte. They beat the Kings when they've struggled against the Kings before Jimmy Butler. They took care of Dallas when Dallas had beaten them twice, although they lost to them once with Jimmy as well in Dallas. But in Orlando a couple of nights ago as well. I have a newfound confidence, not necessarily that Jimmy gives them a way to beat some of the good teams because they've done that. He just gives them a much higher floor, and he should be able to lead them to victories against some of these bad teams coming up on the schedule down the stretch.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that you mentioned the Lakers, and the Warriors just simply haven't fared well against Los Angeles.
Not at all.
But you throw all that out the window because these are 2 completely different teams now. The reason why they never fared well against the Lakers was AD is no longer there. They haven't faced them with Luka and haven't faced them with Jimmy Butler. The Lakers are no longer supposedly, although their defensive metrics have been really good since AD has left.
Weird.
But that's a team that no longer has that big fella in the middle that was so disruptive to the Golden State Warriors. They're still long at the wing position with Vanderbilt and Hachimura and even
starting Jackson Hayes at center right now.
Yeah, and they're just, they can extend, but it's going to be interesting to see that matchup between those two because they're two completely, I think, refaced teams when you're talking about the Lakers and the Warriors. Yeah, now that Jimmy's on board, I don't think anything that was sort of, challenges for this team in terms of matchups previously, that all goes out the window because this isn't the same team. And it comes down to just about every sport that at this time of the year is when you want to be making your run.
Yep.
Right? We saw Memphis, we saw Houston, all these flashes that raced to the top of the Western Conference early on in the season and now plummeting. It means nothing unless right now you're healthy and you have everybody on the same string. They're all bought in, and the Warriors have to be a threat. I don't care who you are. You're looking over your rearview mirror, especially after what it is that Steph did the other night when he dropped 56. Do you ever think, what was the bang bang? Was that 9 years ago?
9 years ago, on to the day, the 27th
February
of
27th.
February. Yeah.
And the Garden was 12 years ago?
2013, yeah.
So 12 years ago. Did you think 12 years later Steph would still be doing this?
Of course not.
I mean, it's just sick when you think about Steph some 12 years later. But here's something I wanted to throw at you. I was reading about this, that there's one way to look at this that you really have to sort of, this is one of those where the planets are aligned and you're never going to see this again with KD at 37 years of age, soon to be 37, Steph, and LeBron James, what it is that he's doing. That this is really special, that we need just to sort of take time out and recognize what it is that these guys are doing at such an advanced age. They're all very, very still some of the best basketball players in the league today. Is it that, or is this the new normal? In other words, is this going to be, when you look at Giannis and you look at SGA, we'll talk about Luka, but the investing in your body and now playing at advanced age and recognizing that this is the way to do it, is this going to be sort of what we're going to see from the stars of today? They're going to elongate their careers. It's not like it was back in the day when Magic and Bird got to 32, 35 years of age and it was done.
Yeah.
Like, is this sort of the new normal, or is this just sort of the outlier, what it is that we're seeing with these three?
I think it might just be the outlier.
Okay.
I feel like if we think this is the new normal, I almost feel like we're not giving LeBron, Steph, and KD the credit that they deserve. I mean, this is absolutely unbelievable what they're doing. I mean, you might see, I think you'll probably see, and this is true in most sports, as I don't know, sports science improves and as conditioning improves and all of that, you probably see players playing longer whether they're older, but I don't know if we'll see many players at this advanced of an age be this good still. Like, LeBron is still leading one of the hottest teams in the league over the last 2 months. And Steph, over the last couple of weeks, has been, I mean, he's performing at an MVP level since Jimmy Butler got here. And he's less than 2 weeks away from his 37th birthday now. And the Suns have been struggling big time, but no fault of Kevin Durant. He's still amazing. He's still awesome. I mean, those are just three generational dudes that we might not see a group of those three playing in the league together again for a long time.
Yeah, no, for certain. And maybe I misspoke. Those guys, I don't mean to detract from their stardom. We'll never see three players like that, at least in my lifetime.
Yeah.
I don't think you're going to see another Steph, LeBron, or KD at 7 feet doing what it is that he does. But I'm curious as to whether the stars of today, while they'll never be LeBron, KD, and Steph, can maintain
just extend their prime,
their stardom to their 40s and late 30s. Is this, or is it just because these three are so special? But is SGA, are we going to be talking about some of these younger players 10, 15 years from now simply because that's the way things are done in the NBA?
Maybe. It'll be interesting to see how it all plays out. I mean, SGA is special. He's so much. He's going to be
your MVP.
He's going to be the MVP. Yeah. I mean, I think I would probably vote for Jokic, but SGA is going to win it.
I know we have fatigue, but the dude had 19 assists the other night.
Voter fatigue makes no sense to me.
He's shooting 46% from three.
He's having his best year ever.
Sick.
And he's already won 3 MVPs. So just by default, he's got to be the MVP again.
I mean, take nothing away from SGA. He's incredible, but Jokic is one of one. I mean, I'm sorry, man. That dude is just, it is sick what it is that he's doing. And that's the reason why the Nuggets are so scary, is that and not a good matchup for the Warriors.
Do you think they scare the Warriors the most out of anybody else in the West?
It's because of Jokic. It's because, look, at the one thing that the Warriors lack is size, right? Yeah. But small ball can work against, you saw them, what it is that they did against a bigger team like that of Orlando, and it still works for the Warriors. And it's not like when you say, well, you need a big, well, who's the bigs in the Western Conference that are really going to, that the Warriors are vulnerable against? One is AD,
yep,
and the other is Jokic. Aside from that, Chet Holmgren shouldn't scare you. I mean, he doesn't necessarily play like a big in the paint. The Warriors are fine against anybody, but Jokic...
Wemby would if he's healthy, but Wemby scares everybody.
Yeah, but Jokic is the one guy because of his size, and the Warriors, I mean, the Draymond Green matchup with him, it never really works, and Draymond can usually match against any big body, but the Warriors just have a hard time beating Jokic in the postseason. Now, of course, they got him a couple of years back, but that's when Jokic had absolutely nobody.
Yeah, Jamal Murray was out.
So I think it's a difficult matchup for the Warriors.
No doubt. And, I mean, the Warriors' strategy against the Nuggets in the past, and it happened in that playoff series, and that was when they didn't have a lot of help around him, and it's been the case in the regular season since then as well. The Warriors tend to just say, all right, Jokic, go get 40. We're going to not let anybody else score, and you're going to have to beat us by yourself. And the issue is Jokic is good enough that he has beaten them by himself. I mean, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I think the Nuggets have won like 8 straight regular season matchups against the Warriors. To the Warriors' credit, a lot of those have been pretty darn competitive and close, and a couple of them have actually been like Warriors collapses in the fourth quarter. But the Nuggets, they have the Warriors' number. So if I were to ask you, which team in the West scares you as a Warrior backer, as a Warrior fan the most? Would it be Denver? Would it be OKC? Would it be the Lakers?
It's Denver. And the Lakers are a close second, and OKC would be third. I know that sounds ridiculous because OKC has been dominant. They've been dominant. I just need to see them do it in the second season. Experience is real, I think, when it comes to the playoffs. But the reason why the Nuggets scare me is because of Jokic. But as you mentioned, if you just let Jokic get his, Jamal Murray now is back. And Jamal Murray was not Jamal Murray in the first month and a half of the season, maybe the first 2 months.
He's been much better lately.
Because of maybe the injury. But he is, I mean, he dropped that 50 the other night, a couple of weeks back, and he, along with Michael Porter Jr., are playing. It's very similar to what they did 2 years ago. When you look at the corner that they've turned over the last month. And then Westbrook somehow works into this whole thing.
He deserves a lot of credit.
He really does. And
just being an elite role player.
And who would have thought? I mean, it just seemed like an awkward mix, but it's worked out there. And then their bench, which was always sort of the Achilles heel, Christian Brown is for real now. Yeah. And so
Aaron Gordon still doing Aaron Gordon things.
It's not only a bad matchup for the Warriors, but they're a bad matchup for just about everybody out there in the West.
Yeah, I think I'm with you. I think if I had to put like a fear index on every team in the West for the Warriors, from the Warriors' perspective, it would be Denver number one. I know there's a lot of people out there who, in not necessarily that you're disrespecting OKC. I mean, you have them third on like the Warriors' fear list, but like if you were to take OKC and blank out the team name and blank out the roster, and you just looked at the statistics and the numbers and the figures, like they're a historically good basketball team. Like historically good. They honestly kind of remind you of the 2015 Warriors.
Yeah.
Now, I think so many of us out here in the Bay think of that 2015 Warrior team as like, whoa, man, I mean, they were great in the regular season and they cruised to a title. It wasn't smooth.
No.
They were down 2-1 in the second round against Memphis. Yeah. They were down 2-1 in the finals against the Cavs. And by the way, that was a Cavs team that didn't have Kevin Love. And then Kyrie also got hurt. Mm-hmm. And you're down 2-1. It was Matthew Dellavedova, Timothy Mozgov, and LeBron that got out to a 2-1 lead against the Warriors. Now, they made adjustments, and they fought back, and they won the final 3 games of that series, and the rest is history. But so many of us just say, well, I mean, the Warriors did it when they were young. They had a little bit of help, and it wasn't the easiest, smoothest ride. But OKC has quietly been in the playoffs a few times now. I know they lost in the second round last year.
Yeah.
Shea was in the playoffs as a rookie with the Clippers.
Yeah.
And he actually helped the Clippers push the Warriors to 6 games in that first round series, if you remember.
Yeah,
so they quietly got a little bit of experience, but they are young, and as a team that is the top dog, they do have like by far the least amount of experience compared to teams like Denver, LA, and the Warriors.
And maybe they're not getting the sort of respect they deserve when you talk about the postseason. Because, Grant, if they get in the postseason and run the table, would you be surprised?
No.
No.
They've been the best team in the league.
They are, absolutely. I'm just banking on the fact that
I hear you.
Sometimes you just need your battle scars. And that's just the way this is a rites of passage in the NBA to get and cross that threshold and become a dominant team. I threw this out there yesterday to Goo, which is why I think that this is the year that the Warriors, if they're going to get that title, it has to happen this year. Like, if this is, this is the season that it's not. I know it seems to be this sort of popular thought that over the offseason the Warriors can go and address the 2 guard and get a shooting guard and then get some ancillary pieces. But I think that it's got to happen this year. This is the last dance to me because the switch will go on for OKC. They may be vulnerable last year, and maybe you can get past them this year, but at some point, because they're not going anywhere, all that's going to happen is they're going to get older, and that's a bad thing. It's a bad recipe for the Warriors. Them getting older is a good thing.
Yeah.
And none of those players are going anywhere. If anything, they've got more assets in terms of draft picks.
Oh, yeah. They have the tools to get better still.
And so, to me, the window is ajar right now because they're going to own that conference, I think, for the foreseeable future.
Interesting. I also think when you look at it purely from a Warriors perspective, like, okay, they signed Jimmy Butler to a 2-year extension, so you've got 2 years of Jimmy after this year. Honestly, that second year, 2027, like, throw it out the window. I mean, Steph's going to be turning 39 that year. You're going to have Jimmy Butler 37. You're going to have Draymond 37. Like, that seems like unimportant. You might ask, well, why the hell are the Warriors paying Jimmy 50-some-odd million for that year? Well, they paid Jimmy, and they gave him the 2-year extension so that he would come here and be happy right now.
Yeah.
Right? Like, they're paying $50+ million 2 years from now so that right now they get happy, locked-in Jimmy, so that Jimmy can be here and be present and be playoff Jimmy. And I think maybe an eye on next year too, but specifically for this year. Like, that's why they're paying him. The report the Sunday before the trade deadline, if you remember, was Jimmy Butler is refusing to sign an extension with the Warriors. Not that he didn't want to be here and that he wouldn't, but that the money, I'm sure, just wasn't up to what he wanted. And then the Warriors struck out on KD because KD didn't want to come here, and they went back to Jimmy, and they said, all right, Jimmy, we'll give you an extra 2 years and $112 million or whatever it was. And then Jimmy was like, okay, cool, deal. Like, they're just paying him for those 2 years so that he's happy now. And they have to take advantage of it.
You see it in baseball all the time. When these guys sign 10-year contracts, the owners know that they're going to eat the final 3 years of that deal.
You think the Mets are going to be happy about Soto in 2040?
It's what happens. Albert Pujols way back in the day signing that crazy deal, but it makes sense to them.
Josh Hamilton with the same team, the Angels.
If I can get a title or if I can be good the next year, or when it comes to these long contracts in baseball, if I can get 4 or 5 years, it'll justify me eating the final 3 or 4 years of that contract. And I think there's sort of similar thinking here with Jimmy Butler. I think this is the year, though. I don't think that if you want to come back a year older, where Steph's now going to be 38 and those guys are 36, I don't think that the Thunder are going to let you. The Thunder, at some point, the Thunder are going to be the Thunder. They're going to be the dominant team in the regular season, and they're also going to cruise to a title in the postseason. So this is it to me. This is the year. If you're going to get them, it's got to happen this season.
I will say the one thing that the Warriors did allow themselves at the deadline, Dan, and part of it is because, I mean, you could say the Warriors got lucky with the way the Jimmy Butler thing played out. Seemed like Phoenix was a match made in heaven, but one big issue, Bradley Beal has a no-trade clause, and that gummed up the works and made it impossible to happen there. So then the only trade partner...
Not to mention KD didn't want to come.
Yeah, seemed like it. So then the only trade partner as a result that the Heat had was the Warriors. As a result, the Heat don't have a lot of leverage. They can't ask for the world from the Warriors because they want to get out of Jimmy for whatever price, even if it didn't cost the Warriors that much. So the Warriors got a depressed value Jimmy, only had to give up 1 first-round pick, and it's top 10 protected. It's going to convey this year, and it's going to be probably in the 20s, considering the way the Warriors are playing. Great value from the Warriors, not going to be a great pick, and there's already reports the Warriors aren't really big fans of any players outside of like the top 12, so if that's the way you felt, this was a pretty safe gamble for the Warriors to make, and it only cost you Wiggins, a guy that you were rumored to be shopping as recently as the offseason, and then a couple of other salary filler pieces who were never going to be a big part of your team now or in the future. So you didn't give up all that much. So the Warriors still have the, as they say, and this is kind of a dirty word in the Warrior fan base, optionality. They still have the optionality. They have a ton of first-round picks they can still trade. They have all of their young assets, other than James Wiseman from this era, still on their roster. If something does present itself this offseason, they do have the ability to continue to adjust and to make another big change if they feel necessary. Not that they necessarily will, but they have the ability to do that if something is there for them to take in the offseason.
Yeah, there's still an opportunity for them to get creative. The issue with the Warriors going forward is that, for 2 years you've got guys basically on these max deals, but again, the optimism there is that after the 2 years, which isn't that long,
a clean slate.
Yeah, all those things come off the books.
Yeah.
And so it's not that, in terms of just seeing how this works out, keep in mind that 2 years is not that long. But then again, if it doesn't work out, you're starting anew. And so that may require some patience as you rebuild this thing. But yeah, the trade, I was hesitant about getting a Jimmy Butler only because what it is that I saw of the guy over the last year and a half. Butler playing this year, it just looked like a guy that clearly his better years were behind him, and he just looked disinterested. And, of course, a lot of it had to do with the fact that Jimmy just wasn't motivated, and it was personal between him and Pat Riley. But when I saw him, like, you don't want to sign up for that guy. Not only is he too much money, but he's no longer any good. And, clearly I was wrong because, good Jimmy, when you pay him, doesn't resemble anything like what it is that I saw over the last year and a half.
Yeah, no doubt. And even in a game like on Thursday against Orlando, when he doesn't have a very good offensive game, you can still feel his impact on the team as a whole. All right, time for a break. It's Warriors This Week. Dan Devone, Mark Randy with you. We're taking your calls, your texts, your messages on YouTube, 888-957-9570. Who do you want to avoid in the playoffs? Plus, how real is this Warriors Jimmy Butler era? They're 7-1 in 8 games with Jimmy. They've won 5 games in a row. Plus, we got to get ready for Philadelphia today. Warriors in Philadelphia to take on the Sixers. Tip is at 5:30. Pre-game coverage begins at 4:30 here on 95.7 The Game. We're back with more when we come back. It's Dan Devone, Mark Randy with you on Warriors This Week.
come in with a swagger about us that if we show up on the defensive end, we'll have enough offense to get over the hump no matter what the game is looking like. And, obviously Jimmy provides a great presence, a high level of IQ, and connects the game. So if we keep doing that game after game after game, we should be in good shape down the stretch, and then we take it from there.
Now back to Warriors This Week on 95.7 The Game.
Welcome back. Dan Devone, Mark Randy with you here on Warriors This Week until noon. Evan Giddings will be back next week. He's home recovering from a little bit of a cold. He'll be back hopefully on Monday. You'll hear him here on 95.7 The Game. But I'm in alongside Dan here on this Saturday morning. That was Steph Curry postgame on Thursday after his 56-point performance and a win in Orlando on NBC Sports Bay Area. Dan, you heard what he said there at the very beginning. Steph said, quote, "We have a high level of confidence that we can keep this up." How real do you think this 7-1 stretch is with Jimmy Butler? Is this who this team really is?
Well, time will tell. We got to let this breathe a little bit. We still have to see them play a good basketball team. And I think the real test, maybe not necessarily tonight in Philly, without Joel Embiid.
They're not a good basketball
They're not a good basketball team. But
they've lost, 9 in a row?
It was
9 in a row.
9 in a row. When you get to the Garden against the New York Knicks, who have struggled against good teams, I want to say the Knicks. You talked about the Warriors who have done well against the good teams this year.
Yeah.
I believe the Knicks against the Celtics, the Cavaliers, and OKC, the top 3 teams in basketball are 0-7. So the Knicks are going to be a good barometer, I think, because the game's going to be at the Garden. Anytime Steph, who makes one appearance, right, when he does this East Coast road swing, so Celebrity Row is going to be packed. And it's a good Knick team this year, number 3 overall in the Eastern Conference. And so that's games like that, I think, are going to be a good way of sort of recognizing just how real this is. One thing I do want to mention when you talk about the confidence with this basketball team, not only are we turning back the clock and watching Steph doing what it is that he did the other night in Orlando, but remember this team when it was winning, going back to 2016, 17, any of those years, part of what it is that the Warriors did, and it was their signature, was the halftime adjustments. Remember they used to own the third quarter?
Oh, yeah.
The third quarter was theirs regardless of who it was that they were playing, whether it was a deficit or whether it was nip and tuck. They just ran away and hid in that third quarter. And you're seeing a little bit more of that, especially in that game against Orlando when you were down. After Steph hit that 3 at the buzzer to
the
cut
three-quarter court. Yeah.
Cut it to 14, you just had a sense like, okay, third quarter, here they come. I mean, at the time, you were 17 down, Orlando. You're kind of like, yeah, this doesn't look good. But it seems as though they're sort of going back to not only Steph doing what it is he's doing from an individual standpoint, but also philosophically, this is becoming very reminiscent of the Warriors back in the day when they were winning titles.
No, I could not agree more. And I had the same exact feeling at halftime. And I put it out on Twitter. I tweeted, this is a game that the championship-era Warriors, down 14 at half, you're on the road, beginning of a long road trip, on the East Coast, a team that, isn't terrible, but not a great team. They just play out of their minds for a half. You're down 14. This is a game that the championship-era Warriors, you're talking about 16, 17, 18, 19, that they come out, no problem, they win with a great second half. And I think I put out there, they'll probably win this game by like 7 points or something like that. And they won by 6. That was close. But I wasn't necessarily predicting it. I was just saying that this was the type of game the Warriors would control in the second half.
You said they win by 6 at halftime?
I said at halftime.
Oh, wow. Nice.
I said at halftime that this was a game that the championship-era Warriors would win by like 7 points. Didn't necessarily say that it would have happened on Thursday, but my only point is what you're talking about. This has a feeling that championship era did have, which was you could have a terrible half or your opponent could have a great half, and you could erase it in like 7 minutes of basketball. And they did that. They were down 17, Dan, before that three-quarter court buzzer beater by Steph. And then 7.5 minutes later, 7.5 minutes of game time later, so the final few seconds of the first half and the first 7.5 of the second half, they took a 17-point deficit and turned it into a 10-point lead. Over 7.5 minutes of game time. That was a 36-9 run.
So it's a 27-point swing?
Yeah. Over 7.5 minutes. That is what the championship-era Warriors would do. They would just break your will. You could outplay them for 3 quarters. They would all right, like the meme where you lean forward in the chair when you're playing video games. I don't know if you've ever seen that. They take it seriously now. They do that for 10 minutes of basketball. It's over for you. Like, that's what the Warriors were back then. You could kind of coast. Not that this team has the ability to coast. They shouldn't do that. But this felt like that championship era where it's like, all right, we just like focus in for 10 minutes here and we will erase the 20-point deficit and we'll build a double-digit lead.
Well, they did that because of Steph, primarily. Now, Steph had the 56 points, which I think I'm so curious to see what happens today, because if the Warriors are indeed sort of what it is that you described, going back in the day and becoming that sort of team where they own second halves, Steph isn't going to drop 56, I don't think, today. And I don't think he'll have 48. He may not have 30. He may be a pedestrian Steph Curry. But can the Warriors still be good enough to win? In other words, does Steph have to be Steph every single night? Or is the supporting cast with Jimmy Butler and company, is that real? And if it is, tonight, again, is another one of those games where we're going to find out a lot more about the Golden State Warriors. I'm really curious to see, because I don't expect much out of Steph. And maybe he does erupt for another, if he gives 30 or 35, he's feeling it. But if Steph just goes back to becoming Steph, where he's giving you maybe 22 tonight, do the Warriors still have enough firepower to beat the Philadelphia 76ers?
Yeah, well, we'll keep an eye on the injury report, because the latest one, actually, let me refresh this and get the newest injury report. I don't think it's changed just yet. No, it hasn't. The Warriors have 3 names on the injury report. Jonathan Kuminga is still out with the right ankle sprain. There seems to be maybe belief that he could return on Monday when the Warriors are in Charlotte. That seems like a soft landing spot for Kuminga, but he's still officially out today. Yuri Collins is with the G League team, so he's out. He's unavailable tonight. And then the other, Dan, is Jimmy Butler is on the injury report with a mid-back spasm, and he is questionable. He's questionable with that mid-back spasm, which maybe makes a little bit of sense. He didn't look himself entirely on Thursday. I would lean that he's probably going to play in this game, and maybe he takes Monday off in Charlotte, because that's the game you feel like the Warriors should be able to win without him. But keep that in mind. Jimmy Butler, questionable if he doesn't play. How does this Warrior team look without Jimmy Butler, which will be the first time we've seen that since he was added to this team?
And this becomes sort of the one thing that you have to guard against, is the injuries to what becomes sort of, brittle NBA players when they get to 35, 36, and 37 respectively. And, going forward in the final 20 games, you have to avoid anything as far as serious injuries to Steph, Draymond, and Jimmy Butler. It actually doesn't even have to be serious, but these sort of nagging injuries that they can add up. And if you're missing a game, listen, you cannot afford to miss any games from this point forward if you're Jimmy Butler, Steph, or Draymond Green. And just getting back, we talked about how Ant-Man missed the game last night and they lost. That's really irresponsible on the part of Anthony Edwards.
Yeah, not because of an injury, because of 16 technicals.
You can't do that. Yep. You cannot do that, not when you're the T-Wolves and you're vying where every single game counts, man. You've got, 24, 20, depending on who you are. There's just a handful of games left. You can't afford to have your best player.
They have 21 games left now.
You can't afford to have your best player absent of something that he can control. So throwing the ball into the stands, which I think is what got him rung up last time, that's just not smart. And so getting back to the Golden State Warriors, you need everybody. Like, taking a night off and suffering a loss to Philadelphia is not something they can afford. And at this point, I think the outlook, if it's the middle of the season, or if it's, a couple of weeks ago, if you went 2-3 on this road trip, you're thinking, okay, well, we'll take it. But right now, I think that, and it's not being overly ambitious, I think that they're thinking sweep. I mean, the only thing between the Warriors and the sweep is going to come down to, I think, that game of the Garden against the Knicks. I don't mean to get ahead of myself and overlook Philadelphia. Anything can happen, right? But I do think that the Warriors are looking to go 5-0 on this trip.
Hey, you got Charlotte after this one on Monday.
And Brooklyn?
And then Brooklyn.
Before that. Is Brooklyn before?
No, you got Charlotte Monday. So you have Philly today, Charlotte Monday, back-to-back in New York Tuesday against the Knicks.
Yeah.
And then Thursday, you wrap up the road trip in Brooklyn against the Nets. So you'd have an off day. You have an off day Wednesday in New York City, Dan. They're probably going to get after it a little bit on that off day. Maybe you bet the under coming up on Thursday when the Warriors take on the Nets in Brooklyn after an off day in New York City. But you're right. I mean, 4-1 should be like the baseline, it feels like. Today feels like a little bit of maybe a trap game. It's nationally televised. It's an 8:30 local time tip in Philadelphia, 5:30 out here.
That.
Makes no sense.
Well, it makes sense for the NBA and the networks who are dictating these things.
It's ridiculous.
I mean, that's the networks are dictating as to, and they do not take into account whether a team's traveling and what a team has to endure in terms of, taxing them physically. And that's that's all about money at the end of the day.
It happened to the Warriors at the very end of the first half before the All-Star break where they played, I think, an 8:30 local time tip in Dallas.
Yes.
And the game was hard fought. I think Steph had to play like 35, 36 minutes in that game. Then they had a back-to-back the next day with an earlier tip-off in Houston. So they didn't have a full day between games like you normally do on a 7 o'clock tip, another 7 o'clock tip. They had a late tip and then an early tip the next day, and they still found a way to win that game. But if you recall, Steve Kerr ripped the NBA for that after the game in Houston for the scheduling. He called it an absolute joke. I think he might have used the word disgrace. I don't remember exactly, but luckily for the Warriors, they don't have a back-to-back after this game today, but they're gonna be up late into the night in Philadelphia playing this game, and then they got to travel to Charlotte afterwards. Get ready for a game on Monday. But you're right. I mean, this is a road trip where it feels like anything less than 4-1 is going to feel like a disappointment.
Listen, Philadelphia is. I'm a Therese Maxey guy, and Paul George is playing, and
he's playing better.
You got Kelly Oubre doing his thing,
Andre Drummond,
McBride, some of those guys. But I mean, yeah, you should win it. But it's not. I mean, Philly is. They're going to get off the schneid sooner rather than later. I mean, it's going to happen at some point, right? Like I hated playing Orlando after they got drubbed by 40 against the Cavaliers, because you just know that they're going to come out with a sense of purpose, and they did. They went on that 9-0 run to start things.
Yeah.
And it's just, you don't want it. I know that they're reeling. You're talking about the 76ers,
20 and 38.
At some point, you're going to win one of these games, and so you just hope you get out of town where the light doesn't go on for Philly, tonight. But
and Philly doesn't have the ability to say, well, let's lose games, let's tank, because they don't own their first round pick. Do you know who has their first round pick this year, Dan?
OKC.
Of course. OKC has every first round pick.
Well, I love that Paul George is no longer doing his podcast because he says,
so funny.
I've got to concentrate. I want to win a championship. It's like, what, really? You couldn't have done this?
Yeah, you're like 3 months late there, Paul. you could have done that to begin the year, but you're 20 and 38 now. You're not even going to make the play-in. You can focus on your podcast. It's not going to impact anything the rest of this season. But, I mean, I would be a little concerned about this game because it is an ABC game. It's national TV. You do have Tyrese Maxey. You have Paul George. You have Kelly Oubre. You have Quentin Grimes, who I'm a fan of. He can light it up from downtown. Warriors are going to have to bring their A game in this one, in my opinion. And you never know what Jimmy Butler's status is going to be. He's questionable again with that mid-back spasm. But the question we threw out to begin this segment, Dan, was how real is this stretch for the Warriors? And you can shoot us a text, give us a call, 888-957-9570. How real is this 7-1 Jimmy Butler era for the Warriors? I think why I feel like this is real, Dan, it's a number of things, but maybe this more so than anything else. He has transformed the Warriors from a good defense to an elite defense. Like, they've been really, really good since he's been here. In his
number
8
two
games,
overall, I think, since
net
his
rating
arrival.
or defensive rating since he's been here, number 2, the number 2 defensive rating in the NBA. And it's not that they don't really have any elite perimeter, point of attack defender, take away the opposing best guard or wing from the outside. Like, they don't really have that, but they might be like the best help defense team in the league with Draymond, who that's his specialty, and with Jimmy Butler. And you've got pests like Pajemski roaming around who's good as a team like scheme defender and as a help defender. I mean, he has transformed this Warrior defense. I thought that the Warriors were going to be worse defensively, and they were going to have to make it up on the offensive end because you lose your best point of attack defender in Wiggins. And Butler isn't necessarily elite in that area, but he is good elsewhere. But he has made the defense better. And that is the backbone that you can rely on in the postseason. And I think we've already seen it, although it has been against some not great basketball teams. You've seen them win games in different ways, including like in a defensive slugfest like in Houston just before the All-Star break. Like, they have shown a way to win multiple ways, and the way that teams do that is by having a good defense, because that travels And you're going to get that almost every single night in the playoffs. A good defense. The shots might miss some nights, but if you've got a good defense, you're going to have a shot against everybody.
I would agree. I guess, again, this just gets back to the fact that they don't have a big. And is that going to rear its head? Now, Quinton Post is making some noise because I think Quinton Post is not only a stretch 5, but I think that, he can be disruptive defensively. I thought he did a hell of a job defensively. Yeah, I know what it is that he did offensively in the 10 points he had 10 points in 3 minutes to start that second half.
After Steve Kerr put him in the starting group.
In the starting lineup to counter that big front line of Orlando. But I just think that, and I know Steve Kerr talked about how he wanted to put Post in the game so that he could switch Jimmy onto Banchero, but I thought it was Post that on switches or when he was watching Banchero just when you extend and you're 7 feet, you're going to disrupt someone's vision as far as shooting a basketball, and they just don't have those sort of guys. And, he's getting better defensively, but I don't know, is he – I know he's the stretch 5 that everybody covets, but is he the quote-unquote rim protector as well? I'm not willing to go there, but that's the one question I think that when you're handicapping the Warriors is do they – because – this league is cyclical, and suddenly the big has come back in the NBA. When you look about previous NBA champions, whether it's Giannis, whether it's Jokic, big players and Porzingis a year ago have played a significant role. And do the Warriors, the fact that they're absent of having somebody to counter other teams' bigs, is that going to be significant, I guess, going forward as we get ready for the playoffs?
Probably significant if they play someone like Denver, but if they don't play Denver, at least in the Western Conference, I don't know how much it's necessarily going to hurt the Warriors, but I don't necessarily think you're going to have a shot to make the finals if you don't go through Denver. I might think Denver's the favorite to win it all right now, at least out of the Western Conference. But I think what's interesting is the Warriors do this song and dance, Dan, every year where they try to convince themselves they're not best with Draymond at the 5. And then things go poorly with Looney or TJD or whoever it has been down the stretch. Remember, a couple of years ago, it was JaMychal Green, who was also undersized, and they would play him. And there was Dario Saric last year, and they tried to play him as a small ball 5. And part of it was trying to save Draymond, and I get it. And you want to keep him as spry as possible when April comes around so that he can play 5 in the playoffs. But they do this song and dance every year where they try to convince themselves they're not at their best with Draymond at the 5, and then things go poorly, and they dig themselves a hole, and they have to play Draymond at the 5, and then they go on a run. Like, it's just what they do every single year.
Well, and it's not just about having that one singular big. I agree. Jokic is going to be problematic. Another team that, again, it's a roller coaster because they ride Ja Morant. And Ja Morant has not been himself over the last month. But collectively, I think Memphis sort of is also scary. While they don't have that one big, Jaren Jackson Jr.
He's so good.
And you think about Brandon Clark, and even Zach Edey. That's a team that can get really big. And while it may not be one guy,
they're starting Edey and JJJ most times.
And think about what was sort of funny about the Warriors, which I thought that game in terms of matchups was screaming for Quinton Post. I thought a lot earlier than the second half because the Warriors trying to counter that starting front court of that of Orlando.
Wendell Carter and Banchero.
Banchero and Franz Wagner, 6'10", 6'10", 6'11", respectively, all at about 265, 270 pounds.
Banchero is huge.
They countered it with Moses Moody, Draymond Green,
and Jimmy
Butler. and if you're going to do that against Memphis, I don't know. It could be problematic. It's not just that one guy, but some of these other teams have an assortment of big guys that collectively could be an issue for the Warriors.
I hear you about the game was calling, that Orlando game was calling for a big and specifically Post earlier. I don't know if you felt in the moment it was Post specifically. I thought it was going to be Looney. I thought Kerr's move was going to be Looney to start the second half because I thought they were going to be focused a little bit more defensively. And my big concern with Post right now is the defense. But I was pleasantly surprised, as I think you were, with how he seems like he's already taken a step forward on the defensive end. And he's not the quickest guy and he's not the elite rim protector, but he has good defensive instincts. He has good feet. he seems to be in the right spot more often than not, and that's the same on the offensive end. He just has a good feel for the game. I feel like I'm talking like Steve Kerr. He played 5 years in college. Like, he knows the game. He's 24 or 25, whatever it is. Like, he's been playing basketball for a while at a pretty high level. But I was impressed with him defensively, because what he's doing offensively, it's great, but that doesn't really surprise me because we know he can shoot. But I thought they were going to go to Looney because they were trying to stop what Orlando was doing offensively, and Looney a better defender than Post, but Post held his own on that end too.
Yeah, Post is good defensively, but everybody, including the Thunder, the Grizzlies, the Lakers, the Rockets, everybody has the ability now to go small, right? Everybody has that sort of that smaller version. If they want to go small, they'll bring in whomever that's on their roster that's available. And so he's all about matchups because you can't play him when other teams get small. When, yes, he can get out on the perimeter and you know, he's okay, but if you go small, he gets exposed. I don't think...
Yeah, you get him switched out on a guard out there, it's over.
Even some of the swings that are 6'8", 6'9", that have mobility and get to the rim, he's really vulnerable. And that's the reason why the emergence of Quentin Post is so significant, is because suddenly now Steve Kerr has this toy to play with, and it's all matchup based. And if a team is going big, and we need somebody to get in there that can give me spacing as well as counter their bigs, I suddenly have that guy. Whereas prior to Quentin Post, there was nobody. I know Looney, but Looney's limited, and he's not going to space the floor on the offensive end. He's just going to give you defense. Yeah. So, yeah, he's good, but he's also, we have to keep in mind that it's exclusively matchup based, I think, when it comes to Quentin Post. Like, he's not going to see the floor against certain lineups. But again, Orlando dictated a Quentin Post, I thought, appearance that should have been in that first half, but it's all about matchups when it comes to Quentin Post. So some people are saying, well, where the hell's Quentin Post? Why isn't he playing? Well, you got to see who it is that's on the floor.
Yeah.
That'll tell you everything you need to know.
Dependent of the game and what the opponent is doing. The other thing I love about Quentin Post, Dan, is he doesn't seem like a rookie. The play in Orlando, I think it was I don't know if it was in the first half, his stint in the first half, or it was beginning the second half, where he's running up the floor. They're in semi-transition. Podziemski has the ball. He's bringing it across half court, and Post is feeling like the area on the left wing, and he's open, and he's stepping into a three, and he's clapping for Podziemski. Give me the ball. Give me the ball. Give me the ball. Give me the ball. And he gets it, and he hits the three. I don't know how many rookies, especially not 57th picks or whatever, 52nd pick, whatever he is, that has that kind of confidence to demand the ball be thrown to him in a fast break so he can hit a three. And he made it. I mean, that's pretty darn cool.
And when he's throwing up his threes, what does he do? He's doing something at his waist? What's going on?
So he throws up the European three, which is the thumb, the index, and the middle finger. That's what I think. That's generally how a lot of Europeans signal three. Like in America, we use our index, middle, and ring. But in Europe, they add in the thumb and they take away the ring finger. That's what he's throwing up. And the bench absolutely loves it every time that he throws it up. All right, we got to take a break. It's Warriors This Week. Dan Devone, Mark Randy with you. We're here for your calls, your texts, 888-957-9570. How real is this Warriors team? Are you beginning to feel something special? Because this has the feeling of some of those teams of the past that were really, really good. Or are we overreacting just 8 games into the Jimmy Butler era? We'll take your calls and text on that. Again, 888-957-9570. 1 hour down, 2 more to go. It's Warriors This Week here on 95.7 The Game. 5-7 The Game Warriors this week until noon, as always, here on a Saturday on 95.7 The Game. Evan Giddings nursing a cold. He'll be back next week. You'll probably hear him on Monday and throughout the week here on 95.7 The Game. But I'm in for him today alongside Dan Devone talking the Dubs. They're 7-1 in the Jimmy Butler era. Dan, they're 5 games over 500. They're 32-27. And considering everything that's happened around them in the Western Conference right now, they have moved into a tie for 6th in the Western Conference standings. The Clippers at 32-27. So are the Warriors. The Clippers do have the tiebreaker over the Warriors, so they have technically the 6th seed right now. But the Warriors, they're right there on their heels. They're a half game ahead of the Mavericks. They're a full game ahead of the T-Wolves. They're now a game and a half ahead of the Kings and 4.5 ahead of the Suns. They might have their sights set on the 6 or better as opposed to anything else we might have thought recently for the Golden State Warriors. But there's reason to be confident that this is a basketball team, Dan, that could make some noise in the playoffs. It's always difficult when you say, well, they're 32-27 and they're the 7 seed right now. I kind of think of it as 2 separate teams entirely. It's pre-Jimmy Butler and it's post-Jimmy Butler. And I know post-Jimmy Butler, they don't have a win over like a great team yet, and they're going to have some opportunities, although they do have a really favorable schedule. But post-Jimmy Butler, 7-1. The one loss was a close game in Dallas, although they should have won that game, and it's more a knock on them than anything else because that was a Dallas team that had no big men, and they found a way to lose that game. But 7-1 with Jimmy Butler, this edition of the Warriors team hasn't really given you much reason to believe that what they're doing right now isn't repeatable and isn't actually who they are.
Well, the area of concern that I have, while you mentioned how good they have been statistically since Jimmy Butler joined the team defensively, they are a better team defensively, is just on the offensive end. Is there enough, and this is something that gets back to even prior to Jimmy Butler and going back to the last couple of years, have they answered the question that this team, when Steph, and I know the Steph minutes have gotten much better. God, I saw this statistic the other day that prior to Jimmy Butler's arrival, they were a -90, and now they're a +40 with Jimmy Butler in the non-Steph minutes.
Yep.
And so I know that they've been better with Steph off the floor, but if Steph doesn't have it going, if he doesn't drop the 56 or if Steph is not scoring, are we still confident that this team has enough offense? Now, I know Jimmy Butler can get his, but it's still an area of concern where I know that there's been strength in numbers to sort of answer that question, but I guess I need to see somebody, and maybe it's Jonathan Kuminga, that is going to be consistently give you the 18 to 25, not named Steph Curry. And that, to me, is still something that I think could be a concern going forward. It's not on the defensive end, but it's offensively, do they have enough firepower?
It's interesting. Austin, I see you on hold. We'll get to you in a sec. But what's interesting about the way the Warriors have run things right now, and it's a big reason why the non-Steph minutes have been good of late, is they play the starting group, Steph, Podziemski, Butler, Moody, and Draymond. They play that group to begin games and to begin second halves. So start of the first and start of the third quarter. That group of 5 almost doesn't see the floor together again anywhere else other than like the first 4 minutes of each half. And what they do is they'll pattern their rotations around pairing Steph with 4 bench guys for big stretches. It'll be Steph, and it'll be Buddy Hield, and it will be GP2, and it will be Guy Santos, which will be taken by Kuminga when he comes back, I would imagine, and then also Looney. That's like the 5 that get paired with Steph for a big chunk of the second quarter. When Steph comes in and plays like the final 8 of the second quarter, that's a big chunk of it is with that bench group. And what that allows is in the non-Steph minutes, you have the other 4 starters. So you have Jimmy Butler, and you have Podziemski, and you have Draymond, and you have Moody, and you pair that with what they've been doing, Quentin Post. And that's the group that begins second quarters. And that's when Post has dominated. They begin that in fourth quarters. That's when Post has been good. So the reason why they're good in the non-Steph minutes is because they're kind of just pushing Steph off with a bunch, not scrubs, but bench players. And they're saying, all right, Steph, we still trust you to be good enough to carry that group to be at least slightly positive. And then we're going to trust Jimmy and Draymond and Pods and Moody and Post to be good enough without you that we're now going to be positive both with you and without you on the floor. And I would imagine it's only going to be elevated when Kuminga comes back, because that also keeps Kuminga in a spot where maybe he feels like he has a little bit more involvement. And my concern about Kuminga is he's at his best when the ball's in his hands and he's getting shots up and he's involved. And if he's on the floor without Jimmy, without Draymond, he probably has more ability to be involved consistently. If it's just him and Steph out there for the most part, like he's a legitimate scoring threat and the second best player on that group. So I think that's interesting the way Steve Kerr has kind of structured it, and I would imagine it's only going to get better when Kuminga comes back.
Well, you would think so. If you're removing Santos for Jonathan Kuminga and you're playing him with Steph, that's an opportunity, and he needs. I think that he's going to be sort of an X factor to see where he's at and how he assimilates with sort of this new look team with Jimmy Butler, and the emphasis once again being on defense.
Yeah, no, I mean, we could talk a little bit more about Kuminga because, I mean, I got a few concerns, but if he fills the role that the Warriors need him to, then there's no reason that this team can't take another jump forward. Let's go out to the phone lines, 888-957-9570. Austin is in San Jose, and he wants to join the show. What's up, Austin? You're on Warriors This Week. How you doing?
Hey, guys. Happy Saturday. Listen, Dan, you took me right down the road I was going to go to with concern. And by the way, I'm excited about the last couple of games. I do think I want to pause, though. I mean, I heard you guys, Guru, and you guys talking about Western Conference Finals, and I love my boy Guru, but I think that's aggressive. I'm not ready to go there yet. I watched the League Pass, guys. I watched some good games over the last couple of days with Boston and, the Cleveland, and just how these guys are put together. And you got to look at the talent on the floor with these guys. I mean, whether these guys beat you one game or two games, the overall talent level that you have to think you have to guard. I mean, you're going to have to. You got to believe that our guards and guys on the floor are going to be able to match up with these guys in the 7-game series. And I got concerned about that. I see that but Jimmy creates a lot of opportunities for guys to get shots like Oz and Moody and these guys. But the question I would have is, can they make them in a pressure situation? I don't know that we've seen that yet. I could be wrong, but I see our guys, they score a lot of points when we got like a 15, 20-point lead. But we got to see them in a situation where it's pressure, down the stretch. You're playing the Lakers, you're playing Houston, you're playing OKC. And by the way, this disparagement of OKC, I don't understand why people keep questioning whether these guys are ready. They're ready, man. These guys are battle tested. They'll be ready for the Warriors. They have to play them. So, and they're young and they're talented. So I think we need to stop with this. They haven't been tested. I don't buy that at all, guys. I think they're tested. I think OKC is going to be a real tough out just because of talent. So I'm just saying overall, I think I'm with you, Dan. I kind of wonder about, are they built strongly enough in terms of shooting? I mean, they really Post might be the second best shooter from the three right now. And I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. I love Post. But Steph Curry and Post might be the best 2-3. I mean, listen, Jimmy can't make a three. Hodge is not a good three-point shooter. Moody's inconsistent. He can shoot it, but he really can't. You don't trust Buddy. So you don't have any good three-point shooters outside of really Steph and Post. Am I wrong, guys? I'll keep listening. Thanks.
Appreciate the call, Austin. I mean, I think Post is the second best shooter on the team right now.
Yeah, that's a scary proposition. you need, Buddy Hield becomes so much – with every passing game, I know you got to play him, but
he was bad against Orlando.
Such a disappointment. And that's where you were hoping that you were going to get at least flashes, at least be Buddy Hield where, okay, you can be bad for a couple of weeks, but where's the good? Like shooters are typically like that, and you're not getting anything out of him. And if Post is your second best shooter, that's saying a lot, and that a lot is not good.
Let me find this here real quick. Buddy Hield has actually been, I think, better than most of us think of late, and this includes the game against Orlando. So Buddy Hield's last 10 games, Dan. Last 10 games for Buddy Hield, averaging 11 points, 42% from the field, 39% from deep.
Oh, wow.
Over 10 games.
That. I wouldn't have guessed
39%. Like, he has been better of late.
The thing is with Buddy Hield is that when you see Jimmy Butler and sort of the intensity and what it is that he's brought to the team as far as the emphasis defensively, I talked about this with Guru. It's a perfect fit for guys like Podziemski and Moses Moody. Like it's not. It's not a mystery as to why, because there's been sort of this unique bonding or friendship on the court between Pods and Jimmy Butler. Like, no, that was those two were bound to find one another because they play the game the same way. Jimmy Butler is exponentially better, right? But they also, just from a sort of an NBA DNA makeup, they're all about 50-50 balls. They're all about grit and just hard work. That's how they got to the NBA and are as impactful as they are. Same with Moses Moody. And so, that's always, that's what Jimmy has really sort of like, he's lit that fire, and you can see it with Podziemski and you can see it with Moses Moody, and you can see it with GP. They're like, yeah, that's who we are too, man. And you're bringing the best out of us. But Buddy Hield defensively does not fit that mode.
No doubt.
And you can see it. It's like those guys, and then there's Buddy Hield. Buddy Hield does not, it's not that he's disinterested. He's not Jordan Poole, but there isn't the same sort of buy-in or tenacity or get on the floor or knee burns. He doesn't have the Podziemski and the Moody that I will sell out to get to the corner and close out on this guy no matter what. He doesn't have that dog. And it's not so much in the offensive end. To me, what is really glaring about what I think is sort of a deficient Buddy Hield is on the defensive end.
Yep.
That it's sort of like it's all these guys and then him, and he just doesn't sort of fit with Jimmy Butler and company.
Like he almost has to be making his threes at nearly a 40% clip just to be a positive player, because he's a negative
to justify playing him.
Yeah. Because, and I think it's similar to what we talked about with Quentin Post, and where I've been impressed by him is just his feel and his instincts, and that translates to the defensive end. He's not a great defender. I think maybe it fits better for someone like Podziemski or Moody, who just have a good basketball sense. They're natural basketball players, and they are generally in the right spot. They might not have like all the physical tools to be an elite defender, although I think Moody is underrated in that regard. But they're smart. And it's rare that you find where like, oh my, you're supposed to be here and you were way over here. Like, what are you doing? You got to keep your eye on the ball. Like you don't get back cut. Like that doesn't happen to those guys that often. It happens to Buddy Hield all the time. It's not, as you're talking about, not necessarily that he's not trying. It's just that he's not the natural instinctive defender that some of these other guys are, and he just tends to get lost. It's just what he is.
Let me ask you this: when we talk about buying in the 7-1 with Jimmy Butler, what's the end game for the Warriors? Is this a team that's going to steal a series, get to the semis, Western Conference Finals, as Guru mentioned yesterday? How do you see this playing out when we talk about, is this team for real? What is the definition of for real going forward?
I think it's they have all the ability in the world to win a first-round series. And then I think from that point on, it's matchup dependent, and it might be a coin flip. I think Austin and San Jose, our last caller, brings up a good point. Like, you're going to get to a point in a postseason series where, saying you're taking on OKC, or say you're taking on the Lakers or somebody else, and that's maybe not the best matchup for you, and you're a little concerned. Is Moody going to hit an open corner three? Is Podziemski going to be able to score 13 points instead of 6 points? Is Buddy Hield going to hit a couple when you need him? Like, it might come down to something like that. And while Austin is fair, I think, to question whether that's going to happen because we haven't seen it from those guys before. I mean, I can also say the same thing about other teams. Like Oklahoma City, that group has won one series together.
Yeah.
And I know they've got a lot more talent, but they've won one series together. What has Memphis done in the postseason? They've won a series here and there, but nothing special. Houston hasn't won a postseason series. Now you get to the Denvers and the Lakers of the world. That's a different story. But you've also got the DNA of Steph Curry, Draymond Green, and Jimmy Butler, who have won a lot of postseason series in their times. I know Jimmy Butler not as much as Steph and Draymond, but for every one of the Warriors have guys who haven't gotten it done before in the playoffs. They also have some of the best postseason performers that this era of basketball has ever seen. So they've got their fair share of postseason experience too.
Yeah, and I say that because, again, I'll just reiterate that I think that this is the last dance for the Warriors, that it has to happen this season, because I don't think as these players get older and as the Thunder get better and more experienced that you're catching the Thunder. And the reason why I bring that up, Granny, is because you don't see a lot of Cinderellas in the NBA as far as winning an NBA championship. And just to take it there for the Warriors, for those of you that have visions of grandeur when it comes to Golden State, Pat Riley used to have the 40-20 rule, that you want to be a team that wins your 40th game before you lose your 20th. There are 3 teams in the NBA right now that have hit the 40, that won their 40th game before they lost their 20th. And by no surprise, it's OKC, it's the Cavaliers, and it's the Boston Celtics. Going back like over the last 30 years, there's only one team, and I think it was the 2021 Milwaukee Bucks. It was a 21-22.
Milwaukee won in 21.
21.
Yeah.
That's the only team, I think, that didn't get to their 40th win before their 20th loss.
And won the finals.
And so there is, I guess my point in all of this is just if the end game is to win a title, usually you're going to get exposed, whatever those warts are at some point, because the NBA, well, Dallas got to the finals. Like, how did this happen a year ago?
Yep.
And Miami has done it against the Clippers.
Boston against the Warriors.
The Lakers. Certainly Boston. Usually the best teams will win out. And so if you're looking for that surprise or, wow, we caught fire in the second half of the season, I don't mean to throw water on any of this, but the 40-20 rule, blame it on Pat Riley, is sort of a real thing.
Don't tell Jimmy Butler that. Jimmy Butler will blame it on Pat Riley. But, I mean, you're right. I mean, you did just bring him up. I mean, it's happened each of the last 3 years. It hasn't resulted in a championship, but 3 teams that did not satisfy that rule made the finals.
That's true.
Boston in 22, Miami in 23, and Dallas last year in 24.
If this Laker team or if this Warrior team gets to the NBA Finals, man, I mean, they don't have to win it. That's just going to be so much fun because the finals aren't until June. Can you imagine all the craziness with Draymond getting teed up in Memphis and all those huge games wherever they are against Denver or whomever? I mean, it's what we sign up for, right?
Steph Curry ripping the hearts out of OKC fans once again. That would be fun. 888-957-9570. It's Warriors This Week here at 95.7 The Game. Dan Devone, Mark Randy with you. Let's go back out to the phone lines. Darnell is in Texas, and he joins us now. What's up, Darnell?
Hey, what's happening?
Not much. How are you, man?
I'm all right.
What you got?
My question. When I watched the Orlando game, and when we brought Quentin Post in, and I know people complain about his defense, but they couldn't get to the rim. As soon as they took him out, Blancaro and the rest of it just went right back to the rim. He comes in, he hits 5 shots, and then he's taken out. Why is he not starting?
Talking about Quentin Post, Darnell?
Yes.
I mean, I think there's a lot of fans, Dan, who feel that way about Quentin Post. I know we addressed it a little bit earlier. You think it's entirely matchup dependent? He's not the kind of player you can just throw out there against anybody.
Yeah, I think that it just depends on the matchups when it comes to Quentin Post, because he does get exposed defensively. But listen, if it's the right matchup, I think that getting him, I think the one thing that I would say is going to him a lot earlier in the rotation and also playing him later in games is something that we need to see more of. And I think Steve Kerr is beginning, because I think you have to earn Kerr's confidence.
Yeah.
And you never saw Quentin Post closed out that Orlando game, did he not? Or he at least was playing in pivotal minutes. And so it's sort of, it might happen, but it's going to be gradual. But I really think that Quentin Post is matchup dependent in terms of whether or not he's going to see the floor.
Yeah, he usually has been playing the first 6 minutes of the second and fourth quarters. That has kind of been his period, and it's what we were talking about earlier.
The start of the fourth?
Start of the second and start of the fourth.
Okay.
He's been a part of the 4 starters group, all the starters other than Steph, and then Quentin. That's been the group that begins second quarters and the group that begins fourth quarters. That all got shifted around on Thursday because the Warriors went to Quentin Post to begin the second half, and that changes everything up. But I think that's more on a day in and day out basis where you kind of take stock of what you have. I'll ask you this. Against the Sixers today, Dan, no Joel Embiid. Their big is Andre Drummond. They started last time they played Andre Drummond at 1 and Paul at the 5, and then Paul George at the 4. Is this a matchup for Quentin Post today against Andre Drummond?
Is Drummond starting these days for the 76ers?
He has been lately.
I mean, I could see going there because, Drummond's not going to extend out on you.
The other big they play is Adam Bona, I believe a rookie out of UCLA.
Yeah,
that's about it.
So that's telling me that that's a team that likes to go small, which again, you won't see Quentin Post if it's Kelly Oubre, is McBride on this team? Yeah, McBride's playing, or no, not McBride.
Quentin Grimes.
Yeah, Grimes. He came from New York, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So I always get McBride or
Miles McBride and Quentin Grimes.
Thank you very much. So I think if this team goes small, that you won't see Quentin Post, and they have the ability to do that. And I think that is, the 76ers, if you take Andre Drummond off the floor, then I don't know how do you justify playing Quentin Post. I just think that he's going to he'll get exposed on the defensive end.
Yeah.
And again, if Drummond's going to play and be big and give you, big minutes, which I don't think he's doing at this point in his career, I don't think that you're going to see a lot of Quentin Post.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, he has to have the matchup against a big who's not a terrible, not a great offensive threat, and isn't the focus of their offense, because you can kind of just hide him on a guy like that. And that's why it worked with Wendell Carter Jr., because that's who he was guarding for the Magic, and Wendell Carter is not really much of what Orlando does offensively. It's through Banchero, and it's through Wagner, and it's through some of their guards, even though they don't have a lot of great guard play. But you can kind of hide him on the other big and have Draymond or Jimmy Butler or some combination of that on Paolo Banchero.
One of the things I want to see out of him, and I mentioned this with Guru, is that I think that he just has it in his head, and the moniker of being a stretch five, like that's all he can do. Now, we talked about how he can be good defensively, but there were occasions where he got the ball in the post on a switch, and he's being watched by whether it was, I think it was KCP.
Yeah.
By the way, those numbers were, Steph was guarding KCP, had 56, and KCP didn't score. Like, has that ever happened? I mean, that's a pretty big differential. But KCP or Cole Anthony had him on a switch, and he's not even looking at the basket. I said this maybe 10 different times with Guru, is that it got late in the clock, and he kicked out to Podziemski for a contest three that just went nowhere, and it was just a bad possession.
Yeah.
And so the idea that, I would blow into his ear and saying, it's okay if you're not out on the perimeter. You're not just exclusively a stretch five to shoot a three.
You got 6 inches on this dude.
Back him down, or at least get to a jump hook, or just get to the rim, get fouled, or get to the line. But I think he has it in his head that I'm here to do one thing. I mean, he's a kid for the most part. He's never played in the association. I mean, he's 24 years of age, but I'd like to see him, if he gets the ball and he's got somebody, like, as we like to say, a mouse in the house or somebody on his hip, go to work. Go to work. It's not just about you sitting out on the perimeter and shooting threes. You're 7 feet tall, and I know that the post game, Zach Edey, I was reading this, Zach Edey, all he did was post in Purdue.
Oh, yeah.
All he did was live from 5 feet out from the hoop, and that's why a lot of people said, well, you're not going to see this guy in the NBA. And actually, he's been pretty good. He's in the rotation with Memphis. You know how many times his average is, I think, a post and a half a game. They have metrics for this. He's posting up 1.5 times per game, which is ridiculous because that's all he did at Purdue. And so people are I know we get away from posting up players, and I understand the game is played a little bit differently, but when you have the advantage and somebody that's equipped to do it, you don't necessarily have to kick to somebody 25, 30 feet from the hoop, because I don't care what it is that you say, that is always going to be a lower percentage shot than somebody who's 6 feet from the basket.
It's just matchup hunting. When you have the matchup, then go after
it. And we're so, we live in that world to the point where it's just like, this isn't logical anymore.
I think early in the season, we got to take a quick break. Professor, I see you on hold. We'll get to you right when we come back. Early in the season, Post was struggling close to the rim. He wasn't the best finisher. I don't know if it was just a nerve thing or he was just, I don't know, in his own head. But he's been better at that lately. But he could probably be a little bit more aggressive. Or at the very least, instead of just immediately looking to pass it out, back the guy down, draw the double team, and then you could kick. But you're right. There were a couple of times in the Orlando game where he was kicking to a covered Podziemski late in the shot clock, and it was just a hand grenade, throw it up. pray that it hits iron. Sometimes it wouldn't. It would be a shot clock violation. But that might be the next step for Quinton Post. All right, time for a break. It's Warriors wrap-up. We're halfway home here on a Saturday morning. 888-957-9570. Professor, I see ya. We'll come to you right when we come back, so hang out on hold. It's Dan Devone, Mark Randy with you. More on the other side here on 95.7 The Game.
The Game.
Welcome back. Dan Devone, Mark Randy with you here on a Saturday morning, with you until noon as we gear up for game number 9. Yes, yay indeed. Game number 9 of the Jimmy Butler era. Warriors in Philadelphia right now as they're getting set for the matchup against the Joel Embiid-less 76ers. 5:30 is the tip time, Pacific time, which means an 8:30 and it's an ABC game, which probably means more like 8:45 tip-off in Philadelphia, local time out there. We got pregame coverage for you here on 95.7 The Game at 4:30 out west. I got you covered on the pre and the post game tonight here on 95.7 The Game. No Joel Embiid. Honestly, Dan, there's a couple of teams across the NBA that have had incredibly disappointing seasons. I mean, the two that stand out are the Suns and the 76ers. Who do you think has been more disappointing, the Phoenix Suns or the Philadelphia 76ers?
Philadelphia. I think Philadelphia. And, all the expectations with Paul George, who think about all of these scenarios that could have brought Jimmy Butler not to the Golden State Warriors.
Yep.
Kevin Durant wanted to come play here, or Paul George of the Los Angeles Clippers.
We're willing to play ball. Yeah.
Deal him here. So even Lauri Markkanen could have been here if Danny Ainge wasn't asking for everything. But I can't explain. You know what I think it is when you think about the Phoenix Suns, just to step away from the Warriors right now and sort of take an overview of the NBA. It's you can't, if you're still living in the days of where you need 3 stars, I think today, because of the second apron and because of the finances, is that you have to be more balanced across the board. It's like you can't be reliant on just 2 guys or 3 guys and then just compromise and have nothing else. Like, you have to have a bench. You've got to have some sort of depth. There's got to be there's got to be more of that distribution of wealth throughout an assortment of guys as opposed to being centric on 2 or 3. Like, I think that was applicable to the NBA of 5 or 10 years ago, whether it was LeBron, Bosh, and Wade going to Miami and all of that, and everybody's like, that's the template we have to follow. I just don't think you can do that any longer. And Phoenix is perfect proof that this is sort of the new NBA, that you have to get it from more than one, and usually you have to have somebody that's going to pop, like a rookie or a young player, and get lucky along those regards. But yeah, the way Phoenix is trying to do it is a little bit outdated, and obviously it's backfired.
No doubt. And I think with Phoenix specifically, they just have absolutely no defense. I mean, they got one of the worst defenses in the league, and maybe it isn't necessarily that you can't win with 3 stars, but the way we think of stars is guys who can score 20-plus points per game. And I don't know if you can win basketball games that way if you're paying 3 guys like upwards of $50 million a year, and none of them are like elite defenders. Like, you're going to have some firepower on that end of the court, which is what has allowed the Warriors to always have success, because one of their highest paid guys has been one of the best defenders in the league, and that's Draymond Green. And they always have that paired with Steph, and you've got a pretty good basis on both ends of the court no matter what. Phoenix doesn't have that. Philadelphia doesn't have that. They've got some dudes who can go get you a bucket, but can you have anybody that can lead your defense to being a top half of the league defense? No, neither of those teams do.
I think the only way out for them is they got to deal KD, who's going to go over this offseason to Houston.
So Houston,
because I think you get some of those younger assets, and I think that that's what they need to do to rebuild, is you get some of that youth, because you got no draft picks either, right? Yeah. You've compromised your future, so you can go get, some young capital back in return for. And I think that Houston, because the one problem with Houston is, should the Warriors see them in the postseason, I don't know how, but if they did, it's like when it gets down to those big possessions, and there's a lot of those in the postseason.
Oh, so many.
Who's the go-to for Houston?
Yeah.
Jalen Green? Van Vliet? I mean,
Şengün, yeah.
I mean, they haven't defined that, and that really, really gets magnified in the big games in the postseason. And so KD could solve all. I think they're a star away, and KD could be that guy.
Yeah, I'm with you.
All right.
Yeah, I like Houston. They have the good. They got the building blocks for a good team, but they're still a major piece away. And they get that major piece, then
so you're down with me with the KD going to Houston?
I mean, it makes sense for Houston.
All right.
It does. And, you're right. They got some young assets that could be intriguing to Phoenix. I'm a fan of the pieces that Houston has, but I'm with you in terms of why no one is really that fearful of them right now. It's because when you do get to crunch time in a playoff game, how is Houston going to go and manufacture buckets? Sometimes you just need an elite bucket getter, and they don't have that guy. So
no.
Yeah. 888-957-9570. Professor is in Walnut Creek. He's been hanging out on hold. Professor, what's up? You're on Warriors This Week on 95.7 The Game. How you doing?
I'm doing well, thanks, fellas. Love to talk. I first want to comment on the Quentin Post. I mean, he gives you a legitimate inside-outside threat. You know, he can score around the block, and he can score behind the arc. Whereas, like Looney, I'm sure you've seen him play. No one ever guards him behind the arc. Post, you have to. So when he's in there, you have to have somebody guarding him, and he's in there with Steph. Steph gets blitzed sometimes. You have an open shooter with Post. If Hield's in there, another legitimate shooter. I love Post, and I think with Stackhouse being the defensive mind and coach that he is, I think that Post's switching ability and knowing where to go is going to get a lot better, and he's going to be a much better defender as time goes on. That wasn't the reason why I called, but I had to comment on that. I love Post. I hope they play him a lot more minutes. But I'm calling because I got the Andrew Bogut trade right. I got the Kevin Durant trade right. I loved it when GP2 came back from Portland. But I have to tell you that I was really down on the Jimmy Butler trade. I love Andrew Wiggins, and this is before I had any sample size at all. This is when I first heard about it. I felt like Jimmy Butler, 35, 36-year-old guy, always is getting, bad attitude, this and that. Wiggins, number one guy in the draft. He came alive with the Warriors. The Warriors don't win the 2022 championship without his defense on Luka, without him in the finals. I know Steph played out of his mind, MVP of the NBA, but of the finals. But Wiggins, they don't win that championship without him. I felt like after his dad passed away, things weren't great. But this year, he was doing really, really well behind the arc. He was also that Euro step on the inside and still a lockdown defender. The Warriors have obviously won 8 out of 9 with Butler. I'm just wondering what was the switch, in your opinion? I got it totally wrong. What happened? How come he's so much better than Wiggins? I wouldn't have said that he would have been earlier.
Yeah, appreciate the call, Professor. I think the Wiggins Jimmy Butler debate, Dan, it just goes so much further than statistics and then the box score. And if you're just looking at what those two dudes produce in terms of points and rebounds and assists, it might be somewhat similar, although Butler is a much better passer and probably a better rebounder and has the ability to score more consistently. But like their stats this year, relatively similar. But that is a down year for Jimmy Butler and a pretty good year for Andrew Wiggins. But Jimmy Butler just does all of the other things, and he does it on a consistent level, and he makes everybody else better. And Wiggins is relatively inconsistent as well. You'll get a great game from Wiggins, and the next time out, you'll get 9 points on 2 of 7 shooting. Andrew Wiggins, no doubt, our caller was right, the professor was right, that you don't win in 2022 without him. But over the course of his time with the Warriors, you never really got another stretch of like a month or 2 months of basketball like he did in 2022 at any other stretch. And you get that a lot more consistently with Jimmy Butler.
And to his credit, Andrew Wiggins has been very consistent with the Warriors this year. And
he's been better, yeah.
He is, because I was waiting for the other shoe to drop, like, okay, when's he going to disappear? But he was really good, and the professor's right about that. But, Professor, at the end of the day, Jimmy Butler's a better basketball player, simply put. And you can't necessarily see that in terms of stats, but Jimmy Butler is an alpha. And Jimmy Butler is exactly what it is that the Warriors needed. And Jimmy Butler connects everybody. And Jimmy Butler is a presence. And Jimmy Butler is one of one. And it's how he's re-energized the team. I think the 56 points don't happen if Jimmy Butler is not on this team for Steph Curry. But the fact that everybody feels renewed and another an opportunity we'll see where this goes. Jimmy Butler provided all of that. And just Jimmy Butler, when you think about and you line the two up against one another, Jimmy Butler has single-handedly dragged teams to the NBA Finals. And I just don't think, as good as Wiggins is, has that in his arsenal. He doesn't have the capability of doing what it is that Jimmy Butler has done throughout his career.
No doubt. And while Wiggins had that stretch in the 2022 playoffs where he was, I think most people would agree, the Warriors' second most valuable or important piece on a title-winning team, that was one stretch of play. And other than that, I don't think Wiggins has ever really succeeded being anything above a third or fourth best player on a good basketball
this year,
team.
I think he was.
But this was an average basketball team.
Yeah.
With him. I mean, they were a 500 basketball team with him. And that's the issue. He was being asked to be the number 2 on a basketball team. And if you're asking Andrew Wiggins to be the number 2 on a basketball team, you're probably an average basketball team at best. And that's what the Warriors were. And it worked for one postseason run, but the large sample size suggests that Andrew Wiggins as a 2 just simply is not going to work.
Yeah.
And it's not going to work for the rest of his career. It's just he's not good enough. And nothing against him. He's a hell of a basketball player, but he's not good enough to be a number 2 on a team that tries to win a title.
And I think that with his departure, I pointed this out, is that it was so somber. I mean, literally, it was like a funeral sort of surrounding when he got traded.
Right before the game in Utah, yeah.
And just to hear Steve Kerr, who was so emotional, and understandably, because he's a good guy. Say what you will about Andrew Wiggins, and I don't know him. I've never even interviewed the guy, but I think that he's just, he's sort of an introvert, keeps to himself, and I think he's a good soul. Yeah. I think he does the right thing at the end of the day when nobody's looking, as they like to say, when you're measuring whether someone's good or not. And I think he's just a good person. So you always hate losing like somebody like that, especially after you spend a couple of years with them just about every day for 7 months out of the year.
And had some crazy highs with him, like winning a title.
Man, a good basketball player at times. But I think that with the arrival of Jimmy Butler, who can be sort of the antithesis if you think about it, because here's nice guy, as we just laid out, Andrew Wiggins, and meanwhile Jimmy Butler is making headlines for all the wrong things, going back and forth, throwing verbal darts at Pat Riley, and it's just an ugly scenario, and Jimmy Butler has a history of doing this everywhere he's been.
Yeah.
And so I think the Warriors were reluctant in getting Jimmy Butler, and it had nothing to do with what it is that Jimmy Butler can do on the floor, but I do think that there is a precedence that's been set with the Warriors that our culture is done a certain way, and we allow certain guys into our family, and they're typically not like that of Jimmy Butler. But I think that the Warriors were desperate, and they got to a point where they're like, we need to do something. And I think that Steve Kerr, now that Jimmy Butler has been a fit, because I think Draymond Green was reluctant. I think even Steph Curry was like, I don't really know the guy. I mean, I don't know this to be fact. There was a report
before the trade deadline that the Warriors were essentially pulling out of any Jimmy Butler deal because Steph and Steve were concerned about personality fit.
Yeah. And I think after the fact, now that Steph as well as Steve Kerr see what it is that Jimmy Butler's been able to do, I think it's sort of maybe from this point forward has sort of changed the outlook for Steve Kerr, where he's like, look at Wiggins is a good guy. Lindy Waters is a good guy. I love Kevon Looney. I love GP2.
Same thing.
Even Buddy Hield, the nice guys. But you know what? If it's about winning, we have to compromise some of that. Like if we're really gonna win, I've got to like sort of break this mode of, you're a good basketball player, but do you fit our culture?
Yeah.
Like the health culture. If the
just
bottom
give me
line
good basketball players, please.
And that's the NBA.
Yeah.
The NBA's always been about, it's a players' league. Baseball, you can disguise guys, or you can, it's 25 guys. It's pitching beats good hitting. There's the game within the game. NFL, I know it's quarterback centric, but you got 53 dudes and you got special teams and defensive players and offensive. Basketball hasn't changed. It's about the players. It's 5 dudes on the floor. And usually if you're 5 or better than the opposing 5, you're going to be a good team. And I think you got to strip it down sometimes for Steve Kerr, who has a tendency just to look for high character as opposed to the best player.
And I think what you're talking about is exactly what Draymond was speaking of earlier. I forget exactly when he said it, but it was at some point during this win streak where he said, we talking about the trade to get Jimmy Butler. He said, quote, we need another a-hole. We needed another just jerk to come in here and kind of push us around and not be afraid to speak up and to yell at somebody, to lead the way vocally, and to frankly, be not necessarily mean, but to be so dead set on winning and not accepting anything other than trying your best and making the smart play and doing everything the right way and being so laser focused on winning that it might lead you to, yelling at a teammate and saying, hey, what the hell are you doing? That's not how we do it. And Wiggins was never going to be that guy. It's not a knock on Wiggins the person. He's just not that kind of person or player. Jimmy Butler is, to the point where he has rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. And it got him out of Chicago. It got him out of Minnesota. Maybe Philadelphia for a similar reason. Oh, that was a really short stint. That wasn't the reason that got him out of Miami. He wanted money in Miami. But everywhere else, it was because he was so darn competitive that maybe some of the people who were a little bit more relaxed and hands off and were like, just go with the flow, it upset them. And that's what led him to leave a lot of those places.
Yeah, and it gets back to, again, where I think that the players that have that in their gene pool are going to gravitate and get Jimmy. And it's not a mystery as to why Podziemski and him have created this on-the-court bond. I love what Podziemski said after the Rising Star won an out game. He played in one game and he was out, and in his post-game comments.
What did he say?
Well, he basically inferred that he's like, don't invite me to this again because these guys don't want to win. It's like he doesn't care where he's playing. Those guys are all about winning, man. I mean, did you see Moody in the skills competition? Like, Draymond blew it for him. I mean, the Moody and Podziemski, those guys, Podziemski was pissed off that he's playing with these rising stars that didn't want to win a basketball game. And that's exactly who Jimmy Butler is. You know, we talked about Draymond Green. I just want to sort of change channels here for a second.
Yeah.
Did you happen to see his podcast with Kevin Durant?
Oh, yeah, of course.
That was one of the most revealing interviews I've ever seen of Kevin Durant. Like, I've never seen him that candid. Now, he looked a little baked. I mean, I don't know how stoned he and B. Diddy were, but...
Well, B. Diddy, for sure.
Oh, my God. Just look at the eyes on both of those guys. But it was also... It was one of the most revealing, and I've sort of maintained this for a while, but now I'm more on board. We're always looking for authentic people. I think he's like one of the most authentic guys. Like, I know LeBron wants to be real.
Oh, he's not.
No, not at all. But I think KD has always been, and I know that, a lot of people have issues with him, but I just think that guy, he is who he is. And it doesn't always work by hitching your wagon with Kyrie and going to Brooklyn. But I do respect that guy. And he's becoming one of my more favorite people. That interview, and I tell everybody, if you have an opportunity, I'm advising everybody just to go watch 5 or 10 minutes of it, because he's not pulling punches. And I thought it was so revealing what it is that he had to say.
Yeah, I listened to the whole thing, and so much of what I'm sure, if you're a loyal listener to 95.7 The Game, probably the only stuff you heard here was him talking about why he turned down the trade to the Warriors at the trade deadline, and if maybe he's open to it in the offseason, and that's obviously pertinent.
You got to listen, it's a totality.
That's obviously pertinent to the Warriors. But they got into a conversation about his career and his mindset and the way in which he practices and what he wants out of himself in an individual game, talking about how he'd rather score 29 points on 13 shots, go 9 for 13 from the field as opposed to scoring 40, and he took a ton of shots because if he's only taking 12 shots or 13 shots a game, he can get others involved.
He wanted to be efficient.
He wanted to be an incredible... He challenged himself, can I make every shot I take?
That's amazing.
I'm never going to take a shot that I feel like I might miss. Like, I'm going to take only shots that I feel like I have a really high confidence in making. How his game shifted when he began that mindset. Him and Draymond agreeing that the best era of basketball ever was when he was on the Warriors, which is funny enough because, that was an amazing basketball team. But you also had challengers elsewhere in Houston and in Cleveland, and those were always fun series. But I agree. That conversation was really, really fun to listen to.
Well, how about when he was talking about threes, and he's like, you guys are all coming after us, the players, for shooting threes.
It's the coaches.
It's the coaches, and do you believe that? I remember Steve Kerr at the beginning of the year. Remember, he was telling you
all we're going to do is shoot threes
he's
and run.
This is being encouraged. And in fact, if you don't shoot threes, you get reprimanded. Yeah, so this idea that the perception that the players are just hunting threes, like to sort of pull back the curtain and let everybody know that, no, this is coming from a higher source. The entire interview, and again, I think the reason he was there, I don't know this, but I think he's got a relationship with Baron Davis. They just, Baron Davis really brought him out. I think it was almost like Draymond Green was sort of like on the outside looking in, and he was just going back and forth with with Davis, and Baron Davis was just Baron Davis. When he starts giggling, man, you can't help but smile. It's just so funny. And it's just, again, I advise everybody, if you get an opportunity, if you really want to see the real Kevin Durant, the closest you're going to see in an interview, take a look at that thing.
Yeah, I was on the Draymond Green show via The Volume. So you're welcome, Draymond. There's a free plug for your podcast.
Yes, if he needs it.
Hopefully it helps your numbers. Although when you got KD on, I'm sure you got great numbers anyway. 888-957-9570. Jimmy in Bayview is up next. What's up, Jimmy? You're on Warriors This Week. It's Dan Devone and Mark Grandy. How you doing?
Hey, guys. Thanks for having me on. You know, I've heard this repeated a ton of times that, like, Steph and Draymond question Jimmy Butler's fit. So what was happening at that time is there was a lot of gamesmanship because I believe Butler wanted a 3-year contract. And in contract negotiations, things get leaked out. I've never heard any player go on the record talking junk about another player. I believe these things were leaked to try and change the leverage of the situation. I believe if Butler wanted 3 years, he wouldn't be here. So they were trying to chisel him down to 2, which eventually happened. So I just don't believe this narrative that, and it's been repeated over and over and over again, and I think it's false, that Butler and Curry thought Butler was a poor fit. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, appreciate the call, Jimmy. And I think I do agree with you, and I remember mentioning it when the trade first went down, because there was a legitimate turn in how the Warriors were talking about it and how and how Jimmy Butler was talking about it. There's always negotiation going on. And whenever you hear a report like that, Dan, where some high-level reporter says sources inside the Warriors say, like, you always have to ask yourself, okay, well, why do the Warriors want that information out there? Because they're purposefully feeding it to somebody. Unless there's a leak or a mole, which doesn't really happen inside the Warriors organization, the Warriors want that info out there for some reason. And if they are saying that Steph and Steve Kerr have concerns about Jimmy Butler's fit, Miami sees that and they maybe think, all right, well, maybe we can't ask for as much as we wanted to originally from the Warriors in order to make this trade happen.
Yeah, the only issue I have, and this is true for all sports, is that when you want to get public about how much money a player is making, well, open up your books as well, because they're able to create that narrative of, look at how much money this guy wants, and we talk about, oh my God, it's going to be, it's 150 mil over 3 years, or whatever the numbers might be. Well, let's just see how much the Golden State Warriors make, including merch, including all the revenue streams. And when we see the hundreds of millions of dollars that a team is worth and the sort of money that Lacob and company, and this is, I'm not going after Lacob, I'm just saying it seems to be a little bit one-sided, that we'll talk about how much these greedy players are making and publicize it, but yet not revealing just how much money that the team has and how it easily can afford to pay somebody like this. So it's just, there's not a good representation on both ends. It seems to be a little bit one-sided when we're talking about contract negotiations as far as the players and ownership.
It also seems like, to take the Jimmy Butler example in Miami, it seems like generally the blanket statement was, well, let's blame Jimmy for what happened down there in Miami. And obviously he deserves a share of the blame at least, but there's plenty of culpability that Miami needs to share in that as well. Jimmy Butler willed you to multiple finals appearances, and, for whatever reason, you didn't want to give him a contract extension, but, that's a two-way street, and there's plenty of blame to go around on both sides. We tend to defend the team and the organization over any individual player, which, to your point, doesn't always make sense considering the resources that the team has.
Yeah, and they're able to control that narrative, so we have no other choice. But I think that what's interesting with Jimmy Butler, and this is true for sort of what's trending in the NBA, is, again, this gets back to the second apron, however it is that you want to look at it, that you're seeing a lot of teams hesitant now to give guys max deals. And I think that's what it came down to with Jimmy Butler, is that we're not going to give you the max. Same thing with Luka Doncic. Say what you will about Nico Harrison, but it came down to teams being reluctant to give max deals to specific players. And I think that's basically what it came down to Luka Doncic. And
Now
I
the
think
Mavs just continue to trash Luka in the media still.
Luka Hookah story in The Athletic, which is crazy. But I think they also will look back and you'll look at we're speaking of the Philadelphia 76ers and the Joel Embiid, which he got a huge max extension, and Paul George. And so, when those things go awry, owners obviously take note of this. And so I think the league is a little bit reluctant to give these. They'll do it, but they got to make sure.
I feel good about it, real good about it.
And I think that they found holes in Luka Doncic, although, we don't need to necessarily revisit that thing.
Yeah.
By the way, are you playing at the JCC? Is that the Jewish Community Center?
Am I?
Yeah.
No.
Oh, okay.
Why?
No, because you're mentioned here. You're jacking up threes, playing pickup basketball at the JCC.
Like, the 217, quit jacking up threes at your intramural pickup games at JCC like you're the 5'8" quitting in post. Appreciate that, 217. I'm taller than 5'8". Yeah. I'm 6'2", pushing 6'3", and I got a jumper on me.
I'm just surprised because I used to get into run down there at the JCC. That's not very far from where I live, the Jewish Community Center. I'm just curious what the games are like at the Jewish Community Center these days. My granny's playing down at the JCC.
I gotta stop by. Maybe I'll see what the run's like and give it. We do have knockout coming up on Monday.
Yes,
I gotta try to defend my crown.
Oh, you won that last year.
I won that last year. So to the 217, keep an eye on Monday. Knockout at Chase Center. All right, time for a break. We got one more hour left with you here on Warriors This Week. That's Dan Devone. I'm Mark Randy. We'll take a break. I got a statistic, by the way, Dan. I know you're a fan of Brandon Pajemski. I got a Pajemski statistic that might blow you away. I'll tell you what that is coming up on the other side. It's Dan Devone, Mark Randy with you. We're back with more next on 95.7 The Game. regardless, pregame coverage begins at 4:30 here on 95.7 The Game. Then the Warriors in Charlotte on Monday, New York against the Knicks on Tuesday, in Brooklyn on Thursday. Then they return home for Detroit, Portland, Sacramento, the Knicks again, Denver, Milwaukee, Toronto. They got a nice big homestand coming up after this road trip. We will see if the Warriors can continue their winning ways, 7-1 in the Jimmy Butler era. You want the statistic about Brandon Podziemski, Dan?
Hit me.
So this is from, I saw it on Twitter this morning, Danny Emmerman, who's the Warriors beat writer at Bay Area News Group. See him at a lot of Warrior games, does a great job. He put this into Basketball Reference, and he's searching for players that fit this criteria. So in a span of a player's first 120 games as a professional, that's where Brandon Podziemski is. He's played 120 games as a pro. In the regular season from the beginning of your career, so the first 120 games of your career, best plus minus of any player in NBA history in their first 120 games of their career, right? Brandon Podziemski has the 12th best plus minus in the history of the NBA in a player's first 120 games as a professional.
Well, just to put it into context, give me some of the names that are in front of him.
So, oddly enough, actually, sorry, I said the history of the game. This is since 96, 97, so not the history of the game.
Okay.
I would imagine plus minus probably hasn't been tracked for that long. Yeah. So, since 96, 97. Number one is Dante DiVincenzo, oddly enough. But as you go down this list, you have a bunch of, and I'll get to some of the Hall of Famers and the superstars. You also have someone like DiVincenzo who drafted onto a really good team and immediately was a positive player. But no one's going to mistake Dante for an all-star or for a superstar, but on a really good player and was a positive piece. That includes like when the Milwaukee Bucks won a championship, right? He was on that team, and that was impacting this plus minus. But second best ever, Tim Duncan. Okay, that's an example. Wow. Joel Embiid is on there. Jason Tatum is on there. Obviously a good player the second that he stepped into the league, but also on a pretty good team too. Andre Kirilenko is fifth. Kawhi Leonard is sixth. Kawhi, obviously.
Well, Kirilenko's somewhat of a head scratch.
Interesting. Yeah. Early in his time with Utah. They were always a good team with Jerry Sloan.
AK-47.
AK-47. We talked about Baron Davis earlier. He was the recipient of one of the most famous dunks in Warriors history. But Kawhi's on this list. I can continue going down. Then you get into some of the groups of players who were just drafted into good spots, like Patrick Beverley, early days in Houston. He's on this list. Josh Howard, early days in Dallas.
Oh, wow.
He's on the list. I think he shared the court with, obviously, Dirk, but I think maybe beginning of his career, Steve Nash might have still been there. So, obviously, a good player there. Richard Jefferson with the Nets way back when, with Kenyon Martin and with Jason Kidd and that group, a team that went to the finals. And then you get down to number 12, and it's Brandon Podziemski.
Wow.
Since 1996-97, best plus minus in a player's first 120 games of their career. Brandon Podziemski,
I would not say
best.
The Warriors were not a good basketball team over the last. Wow.
They're doing. Brandon Podziemski has the 12th best plus minus in a player's first 120 games in the NBA since 96-97, and he's doing it on the team that is like barely above 500 during that stretch.
That's really insightful.
It's impressive.
It really is. Well, it's also lends insight as to why Steve Kerr plays him as frequently as he does. We took a lot of calls last night, and it's still really contentious out there when you talk about why Brandon Podziemski, at least the perception is, gets to jump to the front of the line. Because the Moses Moody fans are like, well, what the hell is this all about? And Jonathan Kuminga, don't even get Priest or coach out in, Petaluma started, because they're huge. Like, this makes no sense. Why is Podziemski getting an opportunity for all this run? And I think that goes a long way. And my man Guru was really good in pointing out that, well, there was concern about those two even before Podziemski was drafted. Yeah. So don't put Podziemski into the mix in terms of trying to determine why or why not Steve Kerr is playing these guys. But that I think that sort of lends, because coaches are always looking for players that they feel confident with, that make, quote unquote, and I hate using this because it's overused, but the right play and the basketball plays. And that's been Podziemski. And I'm surprised where's Jimmy Butler's not in that, or at least in the somewhere to be mentioned.
All I'm seeing is the top 17 right now, so I don't know how much further you would have to go to find it. The 650 asking what is plus minus. Although then he chimes in right after and says, we all know plus minus is a flawed stat. For those of you who aren't aware what plus minus is, it is essentially when you are on the court, is your team outscoring your opponent's team. A positive plus minus means in a single player's minutes on the court, your team is outscoring the opponent. So Podziemski in his first 120 games, the Warriors are outscoring opponents by 437 points when he's on the floor in his first 120 games.
Yeah, and that stat can be really flawed for a game or two.
But bigger sample sizes like this.
Yes, I'm on board. Plus minus over a year and a half or almost 2 years is pretty accurate as to the value of that particular player.
So Podziemski's 12th. Some of the names right behind him is Manu Ginobili.
Wow.
So better plus minus than Manu Ginobili. And this is Manu being drafted into like Dynasty Spurs. Better plus minus than Miami with Dwayne Wade.
Wow.
Dwayne Wade when he was first drafted. Those are the two biggest names that are behind Podziemski on this top 17 list that I'm looking at. But, I mean, it's interesting because you have role players who are drafted to great situations, and then you have legitimately Hall of Famers and superstars.
Yeah.
And I don't think Podziemski fits either of those molds. He's not. He's a role player, but not on a great team.
No,
role player on a above average team, but not a great team, and he's not a Hall of Famer. Like this is really, really, and I think it's, as you said, it's a great number that suggests why Steve Kerr has relied so heavily on this guy, because it's just, to put it as simply as I can, Dan, when he's on the floor, good things tend to happen.
Yeah, and he's one of those guys that's sort of, again, out of that Jimmy Butler mode of doing all the other things. Because I think we're so uber focused on when the ball's in somebody's hands. Are they scoring? Are they getting to the rim? And, well, he can be okay, and he's gotten much better there more he was at the beginning of the season. But it's all the other little things, man. Like, he's a winner. Like, there are guys that are they're all about winning, and they do whatever it takes. And not that all roads go back to Jonathan Kuminga, but I don't think you're going to find Jonathan Kuminga on that damn list.
No.
And so it becomes really curious again as to how he fits into all of these things. Yeah. I know that the bat phone just went off in Priest's house somewhere. He's like, oh, God.
Well, I was in with Guru on Thursday, and Guru, I think early in the show, said something along the lines of, they haven't heard from Priest on Steiny and Goo since the trade went down, since the Warriors started winning basketball games, and he asked for Priest to call, and then Priest picked up the phone and he dialed the number. So Priest, you can do it again here on Warriors this week,
or take the day off. I'll be okay with that as well.
You can chime back in on Monday when Guru's back in town. But I thought that was a really interesting statistic about Brandon Podziemski, and again, credit to Danny Emmerman, who I pulled this from on Twitter. Warriors beat writer at Bay Area News Group, does a great job, and that was a really interesting statistic there. Let's go back out to the phone lines here. 888-957-9570. Junior's been hanging on patiently in Pacifica. What's up, Junior? You're on Warriors this week. How you doing?
Hey, fine, thank you, fine. But you guys said something earlier that was really intriguing to me about some of these older guys. You have LeBron and Steph hanging on, to their careers and going a long time. And some of this is sports science, and some of it, is the player and their willingness. So I wouldn't be surprised if there are people in the league who are looking down at Luka for not taking care of this opportunity. Like, the NBA feels more cooperative than most leagues, right? Like, the fans really feel close to the game, literally and figuratively, social media, all of this stuff. And you see somebody with his skills and his weird body, and then you see Jokic with similar build, who is just a master at taking care of himself. So, first of all, I would not want to be Luka looking at the jelly donut and imagining how LeBron James is going to glare at you if you eat that jelly donut, right? This is this guy's life for the next few years. I think there's a new dynamic coming up, right? Are you going to be a bit privileged, a bit entitled about all this money, or are you going to take it seriously, do your best for yourself, for the fans, and are you going to be playing well at 35? Because I think if you're choosing that jelly donut or the hookah and the beer in your 20s, you ain't going to be playing in your late 30s, right? So it's really interesting dynamic, but the sports science is there. Some of these guys pay a lot of their own money, to really take care of themselves. The sports science is there. The money is there to do it right if you want to. And I think the people who don't are going to get a bit of a hard time. Just a quick side note, too, is that Dallas, man, do they want anyone to ever go play there again? Because you're just going to get the rug pulled out from under you so badly. Mark Cuban must just be pulling his hair out about how this new crew is running down the team by running their mouth. Okay, that's it. I'm out.
Yeah, thanks, Junior. I mean, he's right about the Mavs. One, the trade is one thing, and then two, kicking him on the way out the door is another. I don't know how they're ever going to attract another star player to be there long term with how they treated Luka. But, I mean, Junior brings up what we started the show with.
Just really quick.
Yeah, go ahead.
I don't mean to interrupt, but it's not as though it's a destination spot for free agents or stars. So you got Luka simply because, whatever, Vlade Divac had an issue with his old man and the fact that Atlanta bundled this thing and traded for Trae Young. So it's like the stars were lining, you got Luka, and then you just kicked him out the door. You're never going to get another guy like that.
As Dirk's career was winding down, you had the successor.
And my point is that it's not a destination for free agents. It has to be sort of what it is that took place on draft day, 7 years ago, to get someone like that of Luka. And you were lucky enough that he fell to you, and then you did what it is that you did a couple of weeks ago.
And it seems like all signs pointed towards him being willing to sign a major extension to stay with Dallas. It wasn't that they were fearful that he was going to leave, it's that they were fearful that he was going to wear down because of his habits, as our caller was talking about. But
I would say that, to the caller's point, and this is on Luka, that at some point, because what often happens is that these guys are so talented in high school and college that you just play. You wake up and you play. You don't necessarily have to work out. LeBron talked about this. He's like, getting to a sauna after a game when he was a rookie. He's like, nah, I don't need doing that. Now he spends more money. It's like in excess of more than a couple of $1 million in terms of his staffing, of dietitians, of personal trainers.
Every year.
Yeah. And he invests in his body, and that light usually goes on. Junior talked about Jokic. Jokic was always a guy that struggled with weight. And if you look at Jokic early on in his career, his first 3 years in the NBA, he was a pudgy dude. And the one thing they said is, like, you need to get in shape and just think how good you'll be. And he showed up to camp, what was it, like 3 years ago, 3 years ago? And he lost all of it. And he recognized that if I'm going to maximize my talent, and more importantly to these guys, that if I'm going to get the max deal, I've got to take care of myself, because the two go hand in hand.
Yeah.
And we just saw that Nico Harrison of the Dallas Mavericks are not going to invest in a guy, especially with a second apron and all the handcuffs now that limit these teams, that if you're not somebody that is going to take your health seriously, that you could lose out on a lot of money.
And I think Steph is another great example of it, and the 650 just pointed this out. Curry is the best and most finely tuned athlete in sports at 36 years old. You can make that case, but as it comes to Curry specifically, all the ankle issues early in his career, and then, I mean, we hear some of the stories, but we don't know all of the work that he put in on his body specifically, and his legs and the weight training that he did. I mean, he squats more than anybody else on the Warriors, and he's a 6'3" point guard. Like, the amount of effort and work that he's put into his body, into strengthening his legs, and to helping keep his ankles healthy, I mean, it goes beyond what any of us could imagine, the amount of work that he's put into that, too. And as a result, he's been able to stay healthy and has had an incredible career to the point where he can score 56 points on the eve of his 37th birthday.
And it's more difficult, I would say, for him as opposed to Luka or LeBron, or Kareem played for a while. But he has to expend so much more energy to get his shot off, man. Just that whirly
He's
dervish.
6'3", and he can't jump out of the gym.
Is it true that, so you interview him after games, that he goes and works out after a game, and you have to sort of wait around for him?
I don't know exactly what he does after games. I wouldn't be shocked if he goes out and, I mean, they oftentimes get some like post-game lifting in.
Right.
But he takes a while to come to the podium after games.
Yeah, I heard.
Steven behind the glass would know that as well. But, he takes, I mean, sometimes you get Steve pretty quick after the game ends. You get whatever player they're going to bring out, whether it's Draymond or somebody else. But you're going to be sitting in that press conference room for like a half hour waiting for stuff.
Yeah, I think if you're a young player today, the reason you want to work out is that, because this is so true for the NFL, is that an agent will tell you as a rookie, it's not like you can be a top 10 pick and you're going to make money in your rookie deal, but it's about getting that next bag and then the bag after that. So you want to get to free agency. And once you're a free agent, the first time you're going to make a lot of money. But if you're fortunate enough to be a free agent the second time in the NFL, you're really going to set yourself up, right? And the same holds true for that of the NBA. But in order to get that money, to get to a stat where, or to get to a position where somebody's willing to max you out, you have got to invest in your body. You have to take care of yourself. It's a prerequisite. And for whatever reason, Luka's, and I know a lot of people will defend Luka and saying, look it, man, he's drinking his six-pack, but the guy, look at the numbers and look at what he's done. And he dragged that team to the NBA Finals. That's true. At age 24 last year, now 25, I don't think that's sustainable going forward. Not when you get into your late 20s or into your 30s.
Yeah, time will tell. I mean, the other example that you can bring up is someone like Zion Williamson. When he's been healthy and when he's out there playing, Dan, he's one of the best players in the league. Like, there's no doubt. He is unstoppable when he gets the ball down in the paint. Like, you simply cannot stop him. But for whatever reason, hasn't been able to stay healthy. And if you think it's because of his eating habits, his diet, not sticking to something, and the weight that he puts on his legs every time he takes a step, like, that's a big part of it. And that's a big reason why the Pelicans are in kind of no man's land right now. They got to decide what the hell they want to do with Zion moving forward.
That's an absolute mess. I think Zion, you're right. It's the same thing. But Zion also, I think that, we talk about some people are fortunate, like LeBron won the DNA lotteries. It's like these guys are blessed with these amazing bodies. His body is so sort of peculiar. It's just like Zion's. It's like, I don't think he'd be the same. Like Luka could lose weight and just get, as they like to say, yoked and defined. We're like, wow, look at Luka. He lost 35 pounds and he's ripped and he could stay in this league for the next 15 years.
He almost does what he does in spite of his body.
Exactly.
Zion does what he does because of his body.
Exactly. And I think Zion, if he was to lose the weight, I don't know if he'd be the same player because he's so reliant on that explosive play, right? I don't know. I mean, he's one of those guys that I think it's just, unfortunately, he just has a strange body that puts so much stress because he's only, 6'5"? I don't even know how he's not very tall.
Maybe a little taller than that.
6'6", maybe, but he puts, so much stress on those lower extremities. And, it's all about the stress on those lower joints. And it's his body type. I think he's a victim of his body type, believe it or not. It's just not sustainable or durable.
Yeah,
for NBA play.
And I mean, the other example who's similar, not that you ever worry about him necessarily in terms of being out of shape. I don't think we've ever had that conversation, but just when you're that big and you are out there, in basketball, you're leaping and you're jumping, you got all that weight on your legs. I mean, Joel Embiid is another one. And I know we talked about him earlier. You feel like you wouldn't be shocked if his career is just about over because he can't stay healthy.
Yeah, I think his knees are done. Yeah. I mean, for crying out loud, Zion, I've never seen this before. He made a shoe explode in college.
I know. I was talking about that with my friends yesterday.
I've never seen that before. Remember that thing disintegrated?
We overlooked that. I mean, I remember in the moment I was thinking, oh my God, this guy's the most incredible athlete ever. He can jump so high and he's got so much force in his legs that he busted through his shoe. No, it's because he's heavy.
Yeah. I've never seen that before. Well, it's strength, but it's also just that. I mean, it's heavy and a combination of strength and explosion. It's just, it's all of that in that one buxom body. Speaking of Duke, what do you think of Cooper Flagg?
Oh, he's amazing.
Real deal, right?
Oh, he's the real deal.
Yeah, he's so beyond his years, man. He's amazing. Where does he just can't go to Charlotte, man.
When he gets drafted, I think when he makes his debut, he's still going to be 17 years old. Is that true?
No. No, I want to say that he had his 18th birthday recently.
Did he?
Yeah.
Who was I thinking of? I'm thinking of someone else. But, I mean, oh, yeah, you're right. 18, he turned in December.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he'll still be 18 when he makes his NBA debut. He'll be 18 when he's drafted, and he'll be 18 when he debuts next year. But, no, I'm a huge believer in Cooper Flagg. And I don't remember if we were talking about this off air or if this was on air earlier today, Dan, but don't let the Spurs tank and get Cooper Flagg and pair him with Wemby because that would be a hell of a tandem going forward.
Well, I think they are going to tank. Speaking of tanking, I don't mean to be accusatory, but was there sort of a quiet quit on the part of Steve Kerr and Steph Curry?
When?
We talked about the Toronto game, just sort of resigned to the fact that it's not going to happen this year.
That portion of the Warriors season was really weird to me because they lost in Toronto. They had a lead, and they blew it down the stretch, and then it was like a unified message post-game, right? It was Steph, and it was Steve, and it was Draymond, who basically all said, we're not going to go and mortgage the future and do something rash. And this is, of course, with the trade deadline in mind. We're not going to do something crazy just to get like a shot in the dark at trying to win something this year. And then the next game, they win in Minnesota, I think by 1 point, and Steph had some heroics down the stretch, and it was on ESPN. And Steph gets interviewed on ESPN post-game. And he says, essentially, to all you Twitter fingers out there on your trade machines, just shut up a little bit and let us figure this thing out. That was like the way that the Warriors were going. And maybe it's what one of our previous callers talked about. Maybe that was all a negotiation tactic and a way to, try to lower their desperation meter when it comes to potential trades to make. But I mean, it became pretty darn clear, and it was clear at that point. It's clear now that they needed to shake something up big time. So sorry, Steph, but all of us on Twitter, on our trade machines, we were trying to find a way to make the team better, and a big shakeup like Jimmy Butler is what made the team better.
I guess when I say quietly quit, what happened to the bilateral tendonitis?
I don't know.
And the bad hand
hasn't been as big of a deal.
Does he even have the wrap on his hand anymore?
I don't think so.
Like that, it just seemed like
healed it all.
It's not going to happen this year, and the bilateral tendonitis is just like grimacing, and it just looked painful for him, and the numbers were down.
You know how it gets with Steph. You give him a taste, you give him a sniff of being competitive again, give him just the possibility of playing for something meaningful. All that goes out the window.
Boom.
Yeah, and that's what's happening right now. And they're 7-1 in their last 8, and they got a chance to make it 8-1 in their last 9 with a win today in Philadelphia. Okay, we got to take a quick break. We got one more segment left with you here on Warriors This Week. That's Dan Devone. I'm Mark Randy. Always time for your calls and texts. 888-957-9570. We'll be back with more right after this here on 95.7 The Game.
Now back to Warriors This Week on 95.7 The Game.
Welcome back. One segment left here on this Saturday morning on 95.7 The Game. That's Dan Devone. I'm Mark Grandy. We've also got Warriors basketball coming up. Tip-off at 5:30 from Philadelphia, which means Warriors Live begins at 4:30. And I've got you covered today, both on Warriors Live and Wrap Up Today, as the Dubs try to make it 6 straight wins. They try to make it 8-1 in the Jimmy Butler era. The one piece, Dan, that we're still waiting to see on the Warriors, it is Jonathan Kuminga, and he might be back as soon as Monday in Charlotte. He is officially out today, and I can refresh my injury report here. We just got one coming out a couple of minutes ago. I can refresh this and see if there's any update on Jimmy Butler. There is not. He's still questionable. We know Kuminga's out, but Jimmy Butler questionable with a mid-back spasm. But Kuminga's still out. He might return as early as Monday. How do you view Jonathan Kuminga re-entering this Warriors rotation as early as Monday? And do you have any concerns about how it might go? Because what he was asked to do, Dan, I think before he got hurt, which was before the Jimmy Butler trade, and the role that he's going to be asked to fill now, I think are entirely different things.
It's only going to be positive, I believe, because he's going to be an additional scorer. And as I talked about earlier in the show, is that the one thing that the Warriors is a concern of mine going forward, it's not on the defensive end, but it's offense. They need a shot in the arm. They need somebody who's going to provide not offense on like a Buddy Hield, where occasionally you're feeling it from the outside, but somebody who's consistently going to get you buckets. And also somebody who can also ISO like that at Jimmy Butler and get to the rim.
Just get your own.
Get your own.
Yeah.
And he's one that could do that. Now, there's how does he fit in as far as his new rotation will be sort of interesting to keep an eye on. I like what it is that you suggested, him replacing Santos and getting those minutes with Steph Curry while those other guys in those non-Steph minutes stay intact. I just view it as it's going to be nothing but an upgrade because it was so unfortunate with the timing when he went down because he was that guy. He finally turned into somebody who was such a good player that was coming into his own. So the timing was really unfortunate, and you got to give him the one thing you cannot do is go back and revert to last year where you're going to yo-yo him in and out of playing and not playing, and getting 5 minutes and then getting 25 minutes. Like, I think he's got to have a consistent role with this team going forward.
I mean, he'll have a consistent role as long as he's playing well. But I mean, if he's not playing well, I mean, the Warriors now have something to lose. When before Kuminga got hurt, they had no choice but to say, Kuminga, go get us 25 tonight, and otherwise we have no shot of winning.
Right? Yeah.
And if he is costing you games, I guarantee you, Steve Kerr's going to have no second thought, no hesitation to bench him because the Warriors have a chance to. I'm not saying I think it's going to happen, but he'll play a lot if he's playing well. I'm just a little concerned because he has always been the kind of guy, Dan, when the more you put on his plate and the more you ask of him, it's when he's been better. Not just from like a counting statistic standpoint, like not just points per game and rebounds per game, but like legitimately from an efficiency standpoint. He plays more. You ask of him more, he gets more shots up, he's better efficient. Like it's weird. It generally is backwards. The more minutes Kuminga plays, the better he shoots from the field, the better he shoots from deep, the better he shoots from the free throw line. Like the numbers just go up. I'm looking at his splits. You have when he plays somewhere between 10 and 19 minutes, 42% from the field, 27% from downtown. When he plays 20 to 29 minutes, 53% from the field, 36% from downtown. When he's playing 30 to 39 minutes per game, 54% from the field, 40% from downtown. Now, some of it is he's playing well. We're going to play him more, but he tends to be the guy when he has consistent major minutes, he is better. And when he is being asked to be the guy to go out and get you 20 points a game, he is better. But when you're asking him to fit into maybe a lesser role, because now you have Jimmy Butler and you don't necessarily need him to get you 20 or more every single night, like, JK, go get us 14. Like that would be great. He hasn't always been able to fill that role as consistently. So that's where maybe I'd be a little bit concerned, but I think you can kind of solve it by doing what we talked about earlier, where you pair him with Steph, with that bench group, and he can kind of view himself as as an alpha in that group because he's not also sharing the floor with Jimmy and Draymond at that same time.
I've always felt he plays his best basketball when either Steph or Draymond are off the floor. And there were games earlier this year where both of those guys were injured.
Houston at home, Clippers on the road.
And he went off.
Career high in points.
He went off.
Yeah.
And so, to your point, I think that because there's so much structure in place, how does he fit in now that the parents are home, so to speak? Because he likes to be the guy. He is, and he has the talent to take over. But when he has to be deferential, and you could see it. You could see when he's thinking like, okay, I can't just go to the rim. I've got to get other people involved. Or there's Draymond, and I know I don't want to draw the ire of Draymond. Should I take this shot? Like he's thinking through these things instead of just playing. And so that's always going to be sort of the conundrum with him is as just let it go and still fit into the structure of what it is that they're doing. And he has a tendency, I think, to overthink things. And as a result, you don't get the best version of Jonathan Kuminga.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think he was a little bit better at that, and I think the Warriors actually actively made a little bit of a game plan change, and they shifted their offense a little bit towards Kuminga, towards when he was playing great and right before he got hurt. But that shifts away entirely because now either Steph is going to be the focus or Jimmy Butler is going to be the focus, and you have to have Kuminga fit in elsewhere. On our YouTube chat, youtube.com/957thegame, Uncle Looney says, just play like Guy does, Kuminga. Guy Santos. And Guy is the guy who comes in and he's the Energizer Bunny. He'll dive for every loose ball. He'll fight on the offensive glass. He'll maybe not play like elite defense, but the effort will always be there defensively. And yeah, it's one thing to say that, and that would be great. That's the role I think the Warriors need him to fill. They need him to be a slasher. They need him to be, as we were talking about earlier with Quentin Post, a mismatch hunter. You get the mismatch on you, hunt those matchups. If you're an open, in-rhythm corner three, take it with confidence and be a good defender on the other end. If he can do all those things, it's going to be nothing but incredibly positive. But the other factor here, Dan, is he's trying to get a contract extension this summer. And Steve Kerr can say it countless times to him, you don't have to score 20 a game to get a big bag in the league. If you do all the other things, you're going to get a big bag. But it's hard for, I think, I would be hard for me if I was in Kuminga's position to see, what Şengün is getting, what Jalen Green getting, what Scotty Barnes got, what Wagner got, what Cade got. And those are obviously guys on other levels than Jonathan, but those guys, for the most part, do it because they're scoring a decent amount of points. And it's hard to, I think, convince yourself like, hey, maybe I don't need to be the guy who gets up 15 shots every game, and that's not necessarily the path to getting a big bag. It is doing the other things.
Well, did the Warriors not show their hand by not dealing him at the trade deadline that they're going to re-up him?
I think they are.
Yeah.
But they have all the leverage in it because he's restricted. And there's not a lot of other teams out there that have the ability because of the salary cap to even offer him anything.
Yeah, so it's just a matter of how much you sign him for, and you're right. Jonathan Kuminga, if he was a LaMelo Ball and he went to Charlotte, or if he's Cade Cunningham and went to Detroit, or the before-mentioned, any of those players that you meant, Scotty Barnes in a bad Toronto team, Franz Wagner in a bad Orlando team, I think he would have been paid by now.
Probably.
Because he's getting an opportunity to do all those things that we just talked about.
I think that only adds to his level of desperation. Like, oh my God, I only have 20 games left to prove that I deserve that money. So I'm going to go out and try to get mine as much as I can.
Yeah.
And that's not necessarily what the Warriors are going to need from him.
And it really gets down to, because if a LaMelo Ball if they don't take James Wiseman and he's on this team as the two guard, is LaMelo Ball, shooting those 1-foot threes, and the guy averages over 9 threes a game, man. Is he that sort of player? It always comes down to the fine line is being in a structured place like that of the Warriors, where you're synonymous with championships and learning how to play basketball the right way, or just being another big scorer in this league.
Yeah.
And so that's the rub here with Jonathan Kuminga, is that you're not in Charlotte. This isn't Detroit. It's not Toronto. So you're not going to have the free range to put up those big numbers, but you're going to learn how to play winning basketball, which could suit you in the long run. So it's a difficult situation for him, and I think that a lot of this, as he matures, he'll begin to understand. But for the here and now, as it relates to potentially Charlotte coming up in a couple of days, is that I think the Warriors just need a guy, the exact same guy that that went out with the injury, that untimely injury a couple of weeks back, that's just scoring the basketball at a high volume. Yeah. That's really what they need right now.
I mean, coming off the bench, be a super sub and get him 14 points. I mean, that would be huge for this team. And get to the free throw line. And he was hitting his free throws at a much higher clip right before he got hurt as well, which is always important for him in his game.
What about his three-point shooting? I'm of the belief that he's going to be a guy that when we look back on it 5 years from now, you're going to say that's going to be a guy who's going to be much, much better, maybe closer to 40% as far as a three-point shooter.
I believe in his ability as a three-point shooter. I think right now he should only be taking the open, in-rhythm ones, and specifically from the corner. When he's taking those, like when you can just hyper-focus on the really good looks, I mean, he's hitting them at a pretty good clip. I mean, again, when he's playing upwards of 30 minutes, he's a 40% shooter from downtown. And you look at, I can bring up his game log here before he got hurt.
Three?
Let me look at Kuminga first. I'll get you pods. Jonathan Kuminga in, let's see, about a month span from early December to early January. So in his last 14 games played, he shot 40% from deep.
This is who?
Kuminga. Over a month. Basically the last month of basketball that he played. 14 games. He shot 40% from deep, and he was scoring over 20 points per game. And it's where I saw Kuminga's development take a major leap forward here. He wasn't forcing bad shots, and he was just taking what the defense was giving him. And if there was a driving lane, he wasn't going to take the three. He was going to take the driving lane and get to the free throw line. And if there's a hand in his face, he's not going to take that three. He's going to pass the ball and wait for a better shot to show up. That's the mindset that he needs to take. I can get you Podziemski's numbers.
Because Podziemski, at the beginning of the year, remember, he was in like the 20s. It was like in the low 20s.
Full season, Podziemski's 32%.
Oh, well, that's a huge improvement from where. So I would say since he came back from the injury, which was a month and a half ago.
A little more than a month. He's played 16 games since he's come back, and he's shooting 35% from deep, which is that's a decent number. You would like it to be up a little bit higher, but you'll take 35% from downtown.
Especially, considering where he was at in the beginning of the year.
Yeah, no doubt. 888-957-9570. Tim's in North Carolina, and he wants to weigh in on Jonathan Kuminga. What's up, Tim? You're on Warriors This Week. How you doing?
Hey, what's up, guys? Hey, I think, guys, the reason the priests of the world and the coaches of the world make the comments that we make is that it's almost like we don't even know what game y'all are looking at. Like when you talk about Kuminga, over his last 4 years, his success has come from him playing off of others. Guys, they just recently started running things from him probably right before he got hurt. When you go back to his years when he was filling in from Wiggins 2-3 years ago, his success, they wasn't running anything for him. It was coming off of others. So we get upset because it's like, why do we make something out of something that's not there? He's already used to that. And then number two, you're sitting here saying all of these things about Kuminga, three-point, this and that. Guys, from his career, when he plays 30 minutes a game, his career average is 40% three-point shooting. Over 4 years, his career, when he plays 30 minutes a game, he averages 21 points, 6 rebounds, 3 assists, and shoots 40% from three. So this narrative that he's going to be scrambling to prove what he is, I tend to trust the owner of the team. And if you heard him on Power Comedy Show the other day, they know who he is. And he's proven who he is over a 4-year period. This is not a 6-game sample size, 10-game sample size. Over a 4-year period, when he's given 30 minutes a game, he's shown you what he is. And just recently, yes, we see when we run the offense through him, he can move that up to 25 points a game. But the reason that people get upset is because it's always, we don't know what he's going to do. Guys, he doesn't need the ball in his hand. Going back 3 years ago when he, like I said, filling in for Wiggins, he doesn't need, and playing winning basketball, do we forget? We have won games because of him. But what we always talk about, the mistake against the Lakers. Yeah, he blew that one. But we don't talk about the Houston overtime game that he daggered them. We don't talk about the Phoenix game that we won because of him. We don't talk about the Houston game that we played at home that we won because of him. We talk about always the negative and what he might not be able to do. So he doesn't need to come back stressing or feeling he needs to do anything else. Come back, average 12 points a game, do whatever fit into the team. And if we're winning, you're going to get your money, man. They offered him $30 million in the offseason, 30. He wanted 35. I'm pretty sure they'll work at 32, 33, and it'll be a done deal. But it's the reason the priests of the world, the coaches of the world, even myself, all the way to hell over here in North Carolina, we feel some type of way is because we always shortchange what he's going to be able to do. And it's almost like you guys forget what this guy even came from. Like, he didn't make it here now because offenses are run through him. So I guess that's where people kind of feel a certain type of way, you know. So I just wanted to speak on that, man. I appreciate you guys.
Yeah, I hear you, Tim, and appreciate the call as always. Love hearing from you. I know exactly where you're coming from, what you're saying, but I think you're missing a major part of this. This isn't Dan or me thinking that we don't think Kuminga is valuable and not a quality basketball player. I'm just talking about the dynamics of what Kuminga is going through right now and what Tim just laid out. Kuminga, you don't need to worry about, the ball doesn't need to be in your hand. You don't need to go out and get 20 points a game. Do all the right things and get 12 points a game, and the Warriors will offer you 32 a year. He doesn't want 32. He wants more. He wants more than that.
He wants closer to 40.
He wants closer to 40, and it's exactly what our caller just said. He wanted 35 this past offseason. At least that was the report. He wanted 35 around there. Warriors offered him maxed out at about 30 per year. He wants more than that. And he doesn't think, I don't think anybody thinks, if he comes in and averages 12 points a game, that the Warriors are going to have any need to go above 30. That's where my concern is, because Kuminga, as he should be, is going to be looking out for himself and trying to make as much money as he possibly can. And that's where I feel like there might be a disconnect between what he thinks is best for him and what is actually best for the Warriors. It is him being a little too aggressive when the Warriors roster has changed now and they don't need him to be that aggressive anymore.
And are you paying someone $38 to $40 million a year that, to the caller's points, giving you 12 points a game?
No, I mean, the Warriors have no reason to do that. It could be totally unfair to JK, but there's a world, Dan, where no other team offers JK a contract because no one has any cap space basically other than the Nets. And are the Nets interested in Kuminga? Maybe. Who knows? But they might not. And then the Warriors can sign Kuminga for whatever the hell they want.
Yeah.
Because he's restricted. And if he doesn't get no other offer, then where is he going to go? That is a reality. I don't think it's going to happen. I think the Nets will make him an offer. But who knows what the offer is going to be. And if the Warriors decide to match it, then he has to come back here. JK has no leverage in the negotiation this offseason.
No, he doesn't.
Zero. He has none. So all he has left is the final games of this season.
Yeah, and I think getting back also to what it is that the caller was talking about, his style of play and sort of what he perceives as being a misperception of the way, we see this guy. Steve Kerr will tell you as much, is that he's had to be patient with Jonathan Kuminga, and this is what happens when you draft a teenager, is that they're learning on the job. This is a guy that did not have the benefit of playing 4 years at Boston College like that at Quinton Post, or playing 4 years under Woodson at the University of Indiana. And so a lot of the mistakes are requiring a level of patience in those first 4 years. And you talk about the defensive rotation he missed on Austin Reeves and that closeout on the baseline against the Lakers. Yeah, we have a tendency because, it's salacious and as people behind a mic, we do want to dive into things like that, maybe to a fault. But he is guilty of a lot of those things, and it's not us. It's just it's sort of, it's just what it is that takes place when you draft a kid, is that you have to go through these growing pains. And I agree with the call, and I agree with you that I think he turned the corner, and it's why that injury was so unfortunate, because he was it was all beginning to make sense.
It was. You could see it. It clicked.
Yeah, and he knew when to give it up. He knew when to go to the rack. He knew when to take his shot. And it's just, that's what you're just waiting for, that light to go on. And it did. And then he goes down with the injury. If he comes back, I'm with you. And if he's that guy, it'll be a seamless transition with Jimmy Butler.
Yeah. I mean, he should be a piece that makes this Warriors team even better and allows them to reach another level. But again, the difference was before he got hurt and when it began to click. And when he was playing great, and we just ran through the numbers, shooting 40% from deep during that stretch and scoring over 20 points per game and grabbing close to 8 rebounds. Like, he was doing a lot of things really, really well. That's an entirely different situation now. First of all, even when he was doing that, the Warriors were losing a lot of basketball games. Like, it didn't translate to winning. Not that it's Kuminga's fault. It's more so about the rest of the roster. Like, that was a dark time of Warriors basketball. Like, they were ugly. It was hard to watch. And part of the reason why it got to that point with Kuminga was because the Warriors realized, and it was good on them to realize this. I think it took them a little too long to realize it, but they realized, given our current roster, the only way we can win some of these games is if Kuminga takes a leap forward. So we are going to put everything in the Kuminga basket, and we are going to give him everything he needs to be good, and because that's our only way that we win. We need Steph to be really good, and we need Kuminga to be really good. That's the only way we can win right now. That was their reality. And so they leaned into it. That's not their reality anymore. They don't need Kuminga to be 24 points per game to win anymore. You have Jimmy Butler. You're 7-1 right now without Kuminga. Not meaning that Kuminga is a negative. It's just the role is entirely different. And as you said at the very beginning, Dan, Kuminga has thrived when his role has been consistent and when he knows what's being asked of him and when his minutes aren't fluctuating. And all I'm concerned of is if what his role was pre-injury and what his role is now are going to be different, and that's going to be hard for him to adjust to, or at least it's going to take a little bit of time.
Why do you think people are so – why is it so divisive when it comes to Jonathan Kuminga? And why are people so passionate, do you think, when it comes to –
You can see the potential, right?
And so do people see the potential, and do they then feel as though he's being misused by Steve Kerr?
I think a lot of people feel, well, if he was getting more consistent minutes earlier in his career, that we wouldn't be dealing with what we're dealing with now, which is what we're talking about.
Yeah, and there might be some truth to that. He'd be a better
player as a result.
I think there might be a little validity to that.
No doubt.
Even last year, when whether it was Jonathan Kuminga or his minions, it said, like, why are you not playing him consistently? Because when he was playing well, and then all of a sudden he would get in the doghouse, and you were sort of like, well, why? And then Steve Kerr, after having that meeting with him, leaned in on Jonathan Kuminga, and Jonathan Kuminga responded with big numbers. So I think if Steve Kerr was to be completely honest with himself, there'd be some culpability there. But it just seems to be people are so passionate when it comes to Jonathan Kuminga and whether it's Steve Kerr or conspiracy or whether it gets back to Podziemski. I'm trying to sort of find out the roots or the origin of why people are so passionate about Jonathan Kuminga and what it is you and I have to say, or anybody, when it comes to Kuminga playing consistent minutes or being that guy with the Warriors.
Yeah, I feel the same. And I think the whole basis of this even being a talking point is because Kuminga's potential is just so much higher than everybody else on the team. Like, we could talk glowingly about Podziemski for 4 hours. We can sing the praises of Moses Moody and Quentin Post and Trace Jackson Davis if we want, although he hasn't been playing much at all lately. Like, we can do that. But we all know in the back of our heads, if things click with Kuminga, like, he will reach heights that none of those other players can dream of reaching. Like, it's just the natural basketball-born ability that Kuminga has, the athletic ability that Kuminga has, allows him to do things, if things go right for him, better than anybody else. Like,
and I think a lot of it is that they believe, or those that are in the Kuminga camp, that he has that potential, and you're not utilizing it.
Yeah.
Like, he has the potential to be a star, and you don't see it. And that you being Kerr, that being you and I, or anybody else that's critical of him.
Yeah.
That's a star, whereas those other guys are their ceiling isn't nearly as high.
Yeah. Kuminga's officially out today, but he might return as early as Monday in Charlotte when the Warriors take on the Hornets for the second time in 4 games. It is Warriors and 76ers in Philadelphia today. Tip-off is at 5:30. I've got Warriors live at 4:30, which means I'm just going to hang out here in the studio for a couple of hours and get ready for that basketball game. Maybe I'll watch some college basketball. Should be fun here the next couple of hours. But what do you think, Dan?
I think Auburn. You were going college basketball. Oh, I'm sorry. No, go ahead.
Oh, Auburn going to win it all, March Madness? Is that what you're going with?
I like Auburn.
Over Duke? Over Cooper Flag?
Is it Auburn over?
They are number 1, and they're dominating Kentucky right now in a ranked matchup.
I'm sorry. What do I think of the game tonight?
Yeah, Warriors Philly in Philadelphia. Who you think?
I'm kind of with you. If
6 in a row?
Yeah, I'm kind of with you. This is the one game. If it's a trap game, but whatever. The fact that Philly's lost 8 in a row, they're at home and it's nationally televised. This is a dangerous game.
I mean, those players got some pride. They've lost
they're not
9
that
in
bad.
a row.
I mean, Therese Maxey's a bona fide star.
They very easily could have beaten the Knicks in New York the other day.
And Paul George is Paul George is Paul George at times.
We make fun of him, but he's been playing better lately.
And Kelly Oubre is actually not bad at times. I mean,
revenge game for Kelly Oubre.
My point is that it's not a bunch of scrubs, right? This isn't going to be the upset of the year. So, and you're on the road, and you're just coming off that huge emotional win. Steph Curry is not going to have that much gas in the tank, I don't think, after scoring 56.
So win or loss? What do you think?
Oh, is that what you're asking?
It's Warriors are favored by 8 points, by the way. I might take the Sixers plus the 8, but I think the Warriors win.
That's a good call. I'll take the points, but I'll go with the Warrior win.
Okay, we're on the same page.
All right, man.
That was fun, Dan.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. I really did.
A lot of fun.
All right, great.
That's Dan Devone. I'm Mark Randy. Thanks to Steven Risotto behind the glass. As always, I'll be back with you 4:30 for Warriors Live as we get ready for Dubs and Sixers from Philadelphia. Until then, this is Mark Randy signing off. We'll talk in a few hours on 95.7 The Game.